This broadcast of the Competizione Performance League Triple Crown Enduro Series is brought to you by Malwa Transport and Assure Action Transport Expert. For oversized cargo and trucking logistics specialists of Quebec, visit www.malwa-transport.ca. And for an expert and professional trucking insurance firm specializing in property and casualty insurance solutions for freight across Quebec, Canada and the United States, visit www.transportexpert.com. Good evening, race fans, and welcome to a unique first here in a brand new series for the Competizione Performance League, the Triple Crown Enduro Series, live here exclusively on TRTN. Of course, as always, I'm Regan Clark, and it is my pleasure to bring you this broadcast for the next 3 coming weeks throughout the Christmas to New Year's period. And to start things off, we're right here in a track that has gone by many names. Officially, it's the Autodromo Internazionale Enzo E. Dino Ferrari. You may know it by a better name, Imola. Founded in 1953, Imola originally hosted motorcycle races in its inaugural year of operation, only until 1954, the year after, would the first race be ran on 4 wheels. Since then, Imola has played a vital role in the developing history of Formula 1, hosting non-championship rounds in 1963 and 1979, and then became part of the championship rota from 1980 onwards. It is a cornerstone of Grand Prix racing history. Sadly, the tragic events of the 1994 San Marino Grand Prix would ultimately shape Imola's fate for the near future and shaped it into the layout we now know today: 19 turns and a touch over 3 miles of FIA Grade 1. For the Competizione Performance League, this series represents not only a spot of off-season fun around the Christmas to New Year's range, but also the first time many big names in the console ACC community will compete in this league, and their teams following with them. Expected arrivals from Euro Titans, 5-Star Exclusive and Velocity, as well as many others. Beforehand, we'd only have a passing understanding on their presence in the last 2 seasons ran here, of course being the Jaguar GT3 Revival Series and the GT4 Pro-Am Cup America Series. This is the first time for many drivers then from the European stage to make their way into what has been a series dominated by North American and Oceanian talent. We're on board at the moment with a real star of the last season gone in the Jaguars, now driving for Lexus, the number 120 of Vincent Simard. And taking a look into the session itinerary today, we'll find ourselves on a brand new schedule. We'll also get a closer look at some of the teams in attendance for this round of the championship. Looking at the regs though, right now we have 10 minutes of free practice. Coming up is 10 minutes of qualifying and then 120 minutes. That's 2 hours of racing right here in Imola. That'll be the same story over in Monza, and then the same story on the next round coming up. We'll be able to discuss the calendar in just a moment's time. 1 mandatory pit stop with open strategy, so we're told. So fuel and tyres are a consideration of the driver, not so of the pit stop requirements themselves. We've also got a new category system that's been introduced server-wide for the Competizione Performance League based off of the SimGrid grid rating. Bronze drivers will be categorized for having a grid rating of under 2,249, silver from 2,250 to 2,999, and anything north of 3,000 heads up into the pro categories. You'll see it in the bottom left-hand side on the heads-up display as to how they've been categorized. Red label for bronze, grey label for silver, and white label for bronze. Taking a look then at the teams in competition for this Triple Crown, admittedly a short series, but it is absolutely stacked out here. These are the list of the teams coming out from SimGrid. You can see plenty of reputable names on that list as well. Heading down through alphabetical order, we've got 5-Star Esports, Amtrak Motorsport, Black Nitro Racing, Carrera House Sim Team, DKA Motorsport, and Euro Titans Endurance. Fortune Racing, Garage 93, i3 de Ave Maria, Malwa Racing, and Momentum Motorsports, Nomad Motorsport, Team Raceline, VEC Esports, and the Velocity Racing Team, VR46, WWA Met Sim Racing, and Exclusive Esports. It is a star-studded lineup here for what has been a very small championship to come up. Only 3 rounds in all that are still on board here with the Lexus of Vincent Simard. Taking a look though into the wider scope of things for the calendar, of course we're here in Imola. You'll be joining us after Christmas next Sunday on December 28th for the Autodromo Nazionale di Monza as we make our grand voyage over to the Temple of Speed for the session midway. And then on January 3rd, the first race here for TRTN in 2026 will be the finale round of the Triple Crown Enduro Series at the Suzuka International Racing Course in Mie Prefecture, Japan. It's going to be a very exciting series and short but sweet here. Quite a few drivers turning out from all over. So let's get a look around the grid and see what's been going on over the course of free practice so far. We can find right now that there's no surprises LeBay would be towards the front in the timings here, but you can see it is quite the stacked out lineup. Taking a look through, David Tanguay, Zalan Such in the number 996 Audi, a very rare choice indeed. Vincent Simard in the Lexus. We've got Kevin Quain in the Mustang. Till Schwering of 5-Star Esports in the number 1 Ferrari. Richard Cecil, we've seen him a man of many cars. We saw him originally with Alpine, then to Aston Martin, then to Jaguar, and today he races for Honda. Michael Purvis in the number 51 5-Star Esports McLaren 8th at the moment. Sergio Hernandez with the Velocity Racing Team, number 998 Mercedes here. We can see this toward the back of the top 10 from the paddock at the moment. Maximilian Schimpf in the number 78 Lamborghini Huracan. Karl Martel in the number 99, the Red Baron Mustang, as it were, for Maloir Racing. Dan Junior Poulin on a surprise move away from Aston Martin to Lamborghini for this round of the championship. We can see from the heads-up display, but sadly hiding behind the pit wall there, that's Brooklyn Donkin, number 17 from the Euro Titans endurance team. We saw what he was capable of in his debut back at the Nürburgring doubleheader, round 6 of the NLRL Sunday League. Further down the order, we see Alan Alexander sporting a brand new colour scheme. I'll talk a little more about that later on. Further down the line, Luca Gornheimer in the number 77 BMW. It's looking to be an exciting one here for Gornheimer. Axel Cassier in the number 301 Bentley. Ian Skeen in the number 696. Now, peculiarly, he's not racing with Euro Titans, even though he's been a mainstay with the team for so long. This looks to be a one-man operation in that stealth black Mercedes. He's racing for Garage 93. So, very interesting to see there from the 696. Julio Bahena in the number 18. Lucas Kostra in the number 46. He's racing with the VR46 team. Obvious reference there to Valentino Rossi. James Mason in the 413 BMW. Casey Malles in the number 96 McLaren for Team Raceline. We've got Rafael Bayer in the number 28 for Black Nitro Racing. Charlie Harker with the number 33 Aston Martin. They're sporting the livery but not racing for the Heart of Racing team. And Christophe Dupois, the number 39. Now, we're expected a few more drivers in this championship, so there'll be a lot more to pick up on as the weeks progress. We saw not long ago Ian Skeen made his way to 4th fastest there, just behind Simard and what is currently a Bentley 1-2, Tanguay Villabay. As we've just seen there, Simard momentarily had a stab of the front rows. And Tanguay says, no, thank you. I'll have that right off you. Thank you very much. And takes not only 2nd place, but 1st as well. Now leading this free practice session on the advent of the first qualifying of the season by 145 thousandths of a second. Now, getting a look here, with just about a minute and 20 seconds left to go just before we head into what is looking to be an exciting qualifying session at the start of this mini-series, let's discuss what has been an absolutely stacked out list here. Gone are the days of the single make Cup of the Jaguars that we had over the course of the last 9 seasons. We've got a whole plethora of GT3s to play with in the Triple Crown Enduro. And starting things off on the talks of balance of performance comes Lexus, losing 40 kilos on the RCF. So plenty of drivers, including Vincent Simard, will be beaming ear to ear at this information. Bentley, though, plays second fiddle for BOP changes. The Continental losing 17 kilos, so nothing to scoff at there. So that's going to be great improvements for David Tanguay and Christian LeBay, both leading the charge there at the end of free practice. Axel Cassier also assigning for Bentley this season. Honda will lose 13 kilos, so for Richard Cecil in the number 55 NSX, he'll be losing 13 kilos, so great improvement for him. The Nissan GTR Nismo GT3 was registered in this championship, but we've yet to see its drivers show up. And now, if my data is telling me correctly, that would be Cas van Veltzen we're expecting to see having signed up for Nissan in this championship. Hopefully we'll get to see him maybe by the end of today, if not by the end of next week when we head over to Monza at round 2. Aston Martin's V8 Vantage loses 2 kilos. They sit at level pegging there with BMW for weight reduction, 2 kilos off of the M4. Speaking of, Luca Gornheimer of the exclusive esports team takes the fastest time by 53 thousandths towards the end of free practice here with BMW. Audi and Lamborghini, both the Volkswagen Group cars here, find themselves without any weight gained or lost. It's net neutral for the R8 and the Huracan. Mercedes and Porsche gain the same weight there, 7 kilos for the AMG GT and the 992 GT3R. Ferrari and McLaren level pegging as well with 8 kilos. That's one more over the previous two, with the 296 and the 720S gaining 8 for this round. Ford, almost by tradition at this point, is on the short end of the stick with 18 kilos for the Ford Performance Mustang, the Gen 7. We find ourselves at the end of free practice, so that all wrapped up rather nice, neat and tidy. We can see we're in for quite a lot of action here. 23 cars in attendance so far. we'll see if we expected any more by the end of qualifying. What is certain right now, Luca Goenheimer fastest at the end of free practice. It's looking like a hopeful sign here in definitely rather wet and wild conditions. Now, one I want to keep an eye on their headings into qualifying would be that of Alan Alexander. In the sessions leading up to this broadcast, he was leading by a long shot. Moreover, he and Ben Meredith not too long ago led in a torrentially wet Silverstone, all before that fated pit stop where glitches would force them out of line in the competition for the race win at the 6 Hours of Silverstone over on the NLRL Console Endurance Series. Ultimately, that went to the 788 Bentley of the exclusive esports team, continuing to open the lead on their championship bout, looking to be defending world champions indeed. Not far from the line then, the 77, having blasted his way through this session, makes his way to the pits, onto the advent then of a very hectic 10 minutes of qualifying as per the regulations. We can already see it is not a dull moment in the pit lane. Already plenty of cars surging their way out. We can see among them there Hernandez, Tanguay, Quain, also seeing that Cecil, a handful of the Bentleys as well, I believe Eva, Lebay, Cassier, Lebay or Cassia, as we've already seen Tanguay up the road. Let's get a look, though, who's leading that charge. By looks of it here, it looks to be the 996. Let's go and catch on board, then, with the Audi of Zalan Such. In the 996, they're making his way out of the pits, and it's a peculiar one when we bring up the discussion of balance of performance, and moreover, when we bring up the qualifying predictions. As right now, taking a look through it, Lebay predicted at the fastest time, and we must consider now that it is raining, and these will massively hamper the times available for our drivers today. Lebay fastest, Poulin second fastest, with Simard third, Dupois fourth, and Such on your screens at the moment here in the Audi predicted at the top 5. Now that could since change for him in the R8, depending on how these conditions favour the LMS Evo 2. Til Schwering predicted at 6th, Alan Alexander 7th, Matthias Blaschke, before I believe he retired from this championship or backed out of this round at the last second. He was predicted to start here in at least 8th place. He will not. And oh, that's already trouble for Zalan Such. Trouble down at the Aqua Minerale, so that almost forfeited his lead of this charge down towards the line to become the first onto the timing charts. He might have to give that one over to Til Schwering in the number 1 Ferrari right behind him. Meanwhile, back on the discussion then of our top 10 in predictions. Richard Cecil with Honda, 9th place. Charlie Harker with Aston Martin predicted in 10th place. It's going to be a peculiar one, make no mistake of it. It's wet and wild conditions, a bunch of new faces to the Competizione Performance League grid, and all but a handful of drivers we've already seen in one walk of life or the next. Plenty of recognised names for us here, plenty of drivers up on our radar. It's really going to be quite a fantastic crossover event just before the Christmas period, so that's going to be a fantastic little time here. Watching was Alan Such to become the first driver to start a flying lap here in Imola. Let's stay on board with the Audi then. It's rare we ever get to go on board with the R8. Of course, the last of its kind for Audi. They discontinued after this model. Making our way then down through turn 1 in towards the Variante Tamburello at turns 2, 3 and 4. Now, in dry conditions, this is already a sketchy part of the track. In the wet, it is doubly so. So it's going to be an area where a lot of drivers, including Such at the moment, are tiptoeing through, and that's for the exact reason why on the exit of Tamburello catches the grass and the gravel with it as well. Trouble for him right off the bat. He makes his way out of turn 4 into turn 5 and 6 at the Variante Villeneuve. Making our way then down towards Tosa. Now, this is the first of our major overtaking opportunities after those two very tight Variante sections. Brings us into an open hairpin left uphill. So this is going to be a battle of torque for some manufacturers here. Audi might find themselves on the short end of the stick, as they do find themselves, at least with the 5.2 litre V10, just behind the driver's head here. Is a little bit more on the anemic side when pushed up against McLaren's 4 litre offerings or up against BMW's P58 engine, or moreover the 5.4 litre Coyote motor that has dominated GT3 here on Assetto Corsa Competizione, coming from Ford Performance. Making his way then out of Aqua Minerale down towards the Variante Alta. Very easy section to mess up coming up here, as we've seen over in Formula 1 a few years back. Of course, the last Formula 1 race ran here was the 2025 Emilia-Romagna Grand Prix. It has now been replaced on the calendar for 2026 by the brand new Madrid Grand Prix, racing out of the Madring. Now, think upon that as you will. On the way down towards Ravazza, turns 17, 18 and 19. Another overtaking spot here. We've seen things get hairy before. Drivers getting side by side, elbows out. Very easy room for error for drivers heading in through this track, especially so today, given the weather. Down towards line then. Zalan Such to become the first time on the charts here for Audi. Let's see what he can do then. A bit of a spotty start for him. And as we saw there, invalidated for him. So we'll be checking for the number 1 till Schwering to the line with Ferrari. Also does not put a time on the chart, so we'll be up to the 6:07 of Kevin Quain. From behind him there, we can see heading to the line was that of the Mercedes offering, I believe, at this time, that was Sergio Hernandez. But as we've seen now, Christian Lebay and Richard Cecil put times in before Hernandez could. Simard to the line to second fastest. Then looking all the way down the line, the number 99 coming to the line here, Karl Martel with Ford. And no 5th time as of yet. We'll be seeing one in a moment's time, though. The 77, Luca Gornheimer, starts things off with a bang. The BMW up to fastest there by just over half a second. 46 across the line, Lucas Kostra. On his way down towards the Variante Tamburello. 3rd fastest after that last lap. So for Kostra, this is the first time we've ever seen him on TRTN for the number 46 McLaren, racing for the VR46 team. Normally a team that's resided itself to the world of MotoGP, now seems to make, today at least, its 4-wheeled debut. And it's definitely on a bit of a baptism by fire in a wet and wild Imola. Nonetheless, 3rd fastest for the number 46 will stay on board here just a moment's time with the Polish talent. Out through Tosa, you can see that understeer kicking in on him, and that's going to catch so many drivers by the tail in the race coming up, if we are to believe these conditions are to stick around just that little while longer. We'll catch on board with him a little later on, maybe into the race perhaps, but as we see here, a little bit of trouble down through Ravazza for Brooklyn Donkin, who's nearest to the line in the number 17 Ford Mustang. He dives to the pit lane, so that leaves the gates open here for the 996 to come on through. Zalan Suchu started this session on a bit of a low note, might be able to end it on a high note. We're already halfway through the session, so time is very, very thin for our drivers today, making his way down to the line. Then comes the 996, and he's up to fastest by 367 thousandths. Nearest to the line next, Till Schwering in the number 1, only 6th. The 607 coming up next. We'll see an improvement to 7th there by Kevin Quain. And onto the chart, Sergio Hernandez of the 998 Mercedes. Briefly 3rd, and then we just saw a jump up to 2nd for Christian Lebay. It puts him north of Luca Gornheimer. Vincent Simard now takes that off of him. David Tanguay has something to say as well, up to 3rd. Nearest to the line, the 99, Karl Martel. Martel, 8th place there after that last lap just gone. 3.5 minutes left to go. Nearest to the line, the number 77. So we'll be looking here, Luca Gornheimer from 5th on the track. Can he find his way up to pole? Not this time around. He's south of it there by 367 thousandths. He's a little under, actually, maybe looking at it here, that's, yes, 87 thousandths, so a little over 80 thousandths of a second to Lebay on that 2nd row. We've just seen times come in there from the number 39, I believe there, that being Christophe Dupois with Lexus, 15th fastest, the 51 across the line a moment ago to start another flying lap, and after his first, Michael Purvis is in 10th place. We were not wrong in the assertion that a lot of drivers were missing from that list, and this was something that I was willing to bring up a little bit in greater extent here, were it not for how quickly we got underway with action here in Imola. But there has been that noticeable factor, I would say, that of that predicted top 10, just getting a look at that for the 2nd time here, it's shot full of holes when you consider drivers who are not even in the conversation aren't in that top 10. Now we must consider, looking at the times here being in the ranges of a 149.1 at its fastest, that's courtesy of Zalan Such in the number 996 Audi R8. We are definitely looking at times there on that chart that are up in the dries, and it has been a mixed condition session throughout. We see they're up by half a second over Simard. Such, fastest in the Audi. It's a rare, rare sight to see Audi compete in a race. It's even rarer to see them this competitive. Down to the line, Quain to 10th. 119 coming to the line from just 4th place up to 3rd ahead of Tanguay. Speaking of, the number 30 among several cars down to the line at the moment. The 55 of Richard Cecil, 6th fastest for Honda. Tanguay maintains 2nd. From behind him there, the Lexus, I believe that to be, yes, Vincent Simard, 3rd fastest at the moment. Lebay still in 4th. Those two separated by 0.08 of a second for that 2nd row alone. Just seen across the line, Gornheimer fastest. Nearest to the line was the 46 thereafter. That's Lucas Kostra, 4th. And then we saw across the line from behind him there, the 315 of Alan Alexander. Now, it's a good thing we caught on board with the 315. Of course, this is not his first rodeo in wet conditions in that Porsche. Of course, we saw him and Ben Meredith compete with Ruthless Vicar in Silverstone. Sadly, glitches in the pit lane tore away their chances to lead once more and to take Euro Titans to their first victory in the Console Endurance Series way back when. But it's peculiar we catch on board with them now because I wanted to talk about this new paint scheme for the 315. Now, I was having a bit of a think to myself heading into this session, and as we head into now 1 minute left to go in qualifying, it's all hands on deck here. He's really not too far off a chance of being in the top 5, looking at the gap between himself and Lucas Konstra. The 696, that's Ian Skeen. He's just been disqualified from this qualifying session. More on that in a moment's time. What we wanted to catch on board with Alexander for is this new paint scheme. Now, I was thinking to myself, and the black, the green, and the purple, it does remind me an awful lot, and I do like to try and always guess where they get the ideas for these new liveries from, but this one reminds me a lot of, I think it's Gravedigger from Monster Jam, and the iconic monster truck. And it just reminds me a lot of that. I don't know why I thought it was a point worth making. I thought it was just a very nice livery, and I was wondering maybe where the inspiration for it came from. Well, if Alan Alexander is listening, we'll be happy to hear after the broadcast today. Nonetheless, we're on to the final 10 seconds of quali. Right now, Luca Goenheimer resides to the pit lane, content with a 582,000th of a second lead. That is just over half a second to Zalan Such in second place. Tanguay out on track here, just beats the clock to one more lap time here. Can he make second place? Needs about 0.3 of a second, about 308 thousandths to be specific, over Zalan Such in second place. We've seen there Lucas Konstra up to third, so 3 new names, as we've seen just from behind him there, by a hair's width. Alan Alexander, third fastest ahead of Lucas Konstra. Nearest to the line, the 44. We catch on board here Dan Junior Poulon. A rambunctious decision to move away from Aston Martin to Lamborghini, and it doesn't pay off for him here as he makes only 14th for the end of this session. Nearest to the line then, we'll catch next on board with the 78, another Lamborghini, one of 3 on this grid, and it's Maximilian Schimpf on his way down towards Ravazza. Then we'll be catching on board, I would say we'll be catching on board with the 607. I've just been informed there, incident down at Aqua Minerali, the 607. Early retirement to qualifying, so at the best of times here, 11th place for Kevin Quain with Malwar Racing. We see Schimpf down to the line though with Lamborghini. Let's see what he can do in the 78. Down towards the line, he goes from 19th on the field and stays there. So next on board is with the 119, a 2-time champion in the Competizione Performance League. Once with GT4s, then with Jaguars. Now he finds his way into the Bentley. It's Christian Lebay in the 119. He's on his way down through Ravazza, trailing on his 6 there, the 30. Another Bentley, David Tanguay, a rising star through the Jaguar series. We saw him make his debut back in GT4s, but he really came into his own in the time of the Jaguar GT3 Revival Series. But at the end of the first qualifying of the Triple Crown Enduro, where can Lebay place it? Only 8th at the best of times, so all hopes reside there on Tanguay. From 5th to the line, stays 5th, and off from 4th place by a single 10th and 200ths. Actually, looking at it there, no. As a matter of fact, it is actually 800ths of a second. So we've got the maths wrong a little bit backwards there for us, but from 4th to 5th, just under a 10th of a second as it stands there between Konstra and Tanguay. What an exciting qualifying though. And in that top 4, all new names to Competizione Performance League. And for us here on TRTN, 2 new names entirely. Zalan Such in the second place spot there, the Audi number 996, and Lucas Konstra in the number 46 McLaren. It's going to be an exciting session ahead of us then, of course, and looking back to the session itinerary as we bring away the timer for qualifying. Taking a look back into it, of course, we've just come out of 10 minutes of qualifying. We're in for 2 hours of racing here in Imola. And following on from that is going to be the advent of 1 mandatory pit stop over the course of those 2 hours for open strategy. So we're curious to see how that's going to play out. Tyres and fuel are not necessarily a mandate for the drivers at the moment heading into this round of the championship. Well, 3 minutes to the formation lap, and let's get on to the topic of one article of news we'd like to bring up for you at home here. The one article of news, of course, most recently released from the FIA with the final renders for the 2026 Formula 1 regulations released not too long ago. Major takeaways from the latest images compared to when the regs were first introduced is noticeable upgrades to the front and rear wing assemblies. A more in-depth look at the reintroduction of the barge board system, skinnier front and rear tyres while maintaining their 18-inch alloys, and speaking of, a more in-depth look at the wheels themselves, potentially hinting that the wheel covers, an eyesore of the previous regulations, may not be seeing their way to 2026 in their current form. The regs currently detailing they will be considerably flatter and simpler than last season's, with some renders even showing them to be almost a donut shape, exposing the centre of the wheel just that little bit more. It still leaves fans and theorists alike scratching their heads as to if these radical changes will promote better racing from 2026 onwards, or that F1 may be taking yet another step towards absurdist gimmick-heavy racing. We'll leave that with you though, and that is the new car for 2026. More onto the grid for today for the first round of the Competizione Performance League Triple Crown Enduro Series. Luca Gornheimer of Exclusive Esports on pole position in his first ever race in the Competizione Performance League. Zeland Such in second place with Alan Alexander in third. Lucas Kosdra in fourth place with David Tanguay in fifth. James Mason on the third row alongside Tanguay. There's sixth place for the 413 of 5-Star Esports. Vincent Simard in seventh with Christian LeBay in third on the back of that fourth row. And rounding out the top 10, Charlie Harker on ninth place and Richard Cecil on his first drive for Honda in 10th. Kevin Quain in 11th place, Sergio Hernandez in 12th with Carl Martel in 13th, Dan Junior Poulin in 14th, Michael Purvis in 15th with Til Schwering in 16th, Rafael Bayer in 17th with Julio Bahena, rounding out the 9th row in 18th. Rounding out that 10th row though, Maximilian Schimpf in the 78 Lamborghini and Christophe Dupois in the 39 Lexus. Brooklyn Donkin in 21st in the number 17 ahead of Casey Miles in 22nd, Gino Latore in 23rd, and in 24th, after a disqualification, attempting a last two something here, is according to himself, is Ian Skeen of Garage 39. Garage 93, whichever it is. Not Euro Titans, the point being. I believe it is 93 there. Well, 30 seconds left to go. We'll be getting on board with Luca Gornheimer then, who leads this session down towards the start of round one. Let's get on board then with the BMW number 77. Following on his wake here, it's going to be an interesting one because wet conditions are often the great unifier in the world of GT3 racing. Oh, that's a really nice note, actually. We just got word there for the meaning behind the Garage 93 team. Now, of course, some of you may remember way back when we were sadly given the tragic news of the passing of Houdarin 93, a prominent figure in the local ACC community. We actually knew him back from his time with us when we used to be going by TRR, the True Racing Revival server, and he was one of several drivers who were there for us in the ACC division from sort of day one. So we've just got word from Skino. The meaning behind Garage 93 is that is the racing number of Houdarin. That is actually quite a very somber note, in fact. That's got me feeling quite warm inside there. That's very, very nice. It's a wonderful thing for him to be doing. It's going to be ambitious, though, for him. He starts 24th on this grid. It will actually be 23rd, the 51, starting from the pit lane. Let's get a look at the rest of the field then. Luca Gornheimer, of course, we've been on board with for the start of this formation lap, and he's got ample company there from the 996 and the 315. Now, not to jump to conclusions, but based off the colour scheme for Zeland Such's car, I think it's reasonable to assume he's with Velocity. It's the same colour scheme we've seen in last night's XCL Pro Series race, which was a fantastic watch over on the XCL TV channel. Go give them some support. And that was over in Monza, where we saw quite a bit of action for the Velocity team. Can they make up for their losses then in today's round of the Competizione Performance League Triple Crown Enduro Series? Taking a look down that order, James Mason finds himself in the danger zone in the middle of that top 10, heading down towards the Variante Tamburello. Things could get a bit dicey here for the 413. BMW, we've known to be a little bit spotty when it comes to those wet and wild conditions. Some of the best cars in class. You'd be looking a few positions down there to Charlie Harker's point of view in that 33 Heart of Racing Aston Martin. As we saw out through our time in Silverstone, some of the best cars going on that grid have been Aston Martin and Porsche, as a matter of fact. So do keep an ear to the ground there on the car in third place. Alan Alexander, we've already seen him to be an absolute wizard when it comes to wet weather conditions. Moreover, to take into consideration, he's been able to do all of that on controller. So think of that what you will. If you think that the bar for entry into competitive sim racing is set too high, just take one look at what the 315 can do in wet conditions, in a Porsche, mind you, and think again. Looking around that field, we see the 51 starting from the pit lane. That's Michael Purvis with 5-Star Esports. A very confusing sign there. Not sure what's happened for him, whether or not he's just been beaten by the clock, and we'll have to start from the pit lane. Lucas Kosdra, one of the new names on the charts, alongside that of Zeland Such in the top 5. It's going to make a very interesting first impression, not only here in the Competizione Performance League, but to us here on TRTN, as it's our first time ever seeing what the 46 can do. A lot of expectations riding high for these drivers. A real meeting of the minds here. Several big label esports teams congregating under some off-season winter fun right here in the Triple Crown Enduro. Well, not far from the start of 2 hours of racing here in Imola. It's making our way down towards the line here out of Ravazzo, out of turn 18 to turn 19 coming up in just a moment's time. Not long from now then. 2 cars abreast either side of it, 24 cars in all, 23 on track, 1 from the pit lane. Leading the charge on his first ever appearance to the Competizione Performance League is Exclusive Esports' Luca Gornheimer in the number 77. Alongside him, Zalan Such in the 996, potentially Velocity Racing Team Audi. Euro Titans' Alan Alexander in 3rd. Lucas Kostra 4th. Without further ado then, 2 hours set to come here in the Autodromo Internazionale. Enzo E. Dino Ferrari. Without further ado then, let's get this on the road here. Very long run down towards the line, actually surprisingly so. And without further ado, we're green and racing. 2 hours against the clock here. And we can see a great start from the 77. An even better start. One can make the argument there for the 996 to keep pace with the BMW off the word go. A great start from the front row and a brilliant start from the second row as well. A bit of lag though on the way in towards Tamburello for the first time. And I think that is part and parcel to the enormous spray generated by 23 cars rampaging their way down the line here. As we've seen already, breaking away by half a second, goes Gornheimer over Such on his way in towards Villeneuve. Down towards Tosa we go. Half a second between himself and the Audi. You can see they're tucking into 3rd. Safe and sound so far for the 315 of Alan Alexander. Looking down the line, though, I think we do have a momentary yellow flag. It's since cleared itself, so we can't investigate at this time. Taking a look here with James Mason. He's up to the top 5. And we got the leg up there on, I believe that to be David Tangway at this time. Lepay up to 7th. So a great start to the race so far. We see Tangway and Mason potentially to go head-to-head on their way down towards Aqua Minerale. They back out of any endeavours too early on. We see Purvis finally out onto the track. Looking further down the line, Casey Miles drops down to 23rd place. Maximilian Schimpf and Gino Latore looking to get into a fight here for 21st. Not too far up the road from them at all is Christophe Dupois looking towards the back of the top 10 here. Charlie Harker makes the back of the top 10. Richard Cecil up to 9th. And as we see here, Sergio Hernandez in 11th place, charging for a top 10 appearance in the near future. Ian Skeen, one to note here, has carved his way up, started plumb last and is already in the top 15 with chances to move north of Julio Bahena not too far from now. We do have a yellow flag out. It's for the 78 car in trouble. I believe that to be, looking back to it, believe that to be Schimpf in the Lamborghini. Let's see if we can go and catch on board. So we see there Gino Latore passing him. And yes, it was Maximilian Schimpf in trouble. It seems to be a rolling yellow flag down through that final sector to try and recuperate on some of those losses. We just quickly see here a scrap going on for 14th place. That's Skeen v Bahena. Skeen's got him on the run here down towards Tamburello. He'll be up the inside on Julio Bahena's number 18 and already got the move decided before we even hit turn 2. We see ample fight back from Bahena. Now this is the fighting spirit he's carried with him over the course of 9 weeks of racing with Jaguar. Now in his time with Ferrari, he's able to get his elbows out. Look up the road there, as that was a big wobble for the Lamborghini up the road from us there. I believe that to be, yes, it was the 28 off in the background. That's Rafael Bayer. Huge trouble there for Bayer. Lamborghini in absolute shambles for the start of racing here. There was the fears for Lamborghini heading into this round. The stability has rarely been to their aid. And now coming into wet conditions in Imola, it has not been much better for the Volkswagen group, both Audi and Lamborghini having a spot above it here, namely for Zalan Such because he's dropped away from Gornheimer. The BMW now 3 seconds up the road from the battling pair at the back of the podium here. We're on board with Porsche's Alan Alexander on his way down towards the Variante Alta. He's in the fight for second place at the moment. Behind him is Lucas Kostra on his debut drive. Moreover, for a lot of these drivers, it's first impressions in the Competizione Performance League, the first time ever that the timing for these events has finally matched up to the European schedule. Down towards Ravazzo we go, the 996, now half a second from the 315, looking behind there, Kostra gaining ground, looking further down the road. We can see, that's actually up the road. If we look further down the road, we see that Mason now dropping 2 positions away from Simard and Tangway. Bentley and Lexus making a charge up to the top 5. Labain not too far behind. Getting a look then, after what's been a hectic start so far to things, it's Luca Gornheimer in the lead. Zalan Such in second place with Alan Alexander third. Lucas Kostra gaining ground for a run into a potential podium fight after the first 10 minutes. David Tanguay back up to 5th. Vincent Simard in 6th. James Mason in 7th. Christian Labain in 8th. Sergio Hernandez up to 9th. And Charlie Harker maintains a position inside the top 10 in that Aston Martin. So we see a little bit of a hectic run there out of Tambirello. That does give the opportunity up to Kevin Quain to start a proper charge up towards the top 10. He's 11th at this time. Behind him is fellow Malwar Racing Mustang, the 99 of Carl Martel. Richard Cecil with Honda drops down a few, and now onto the iron sights here of Ian Skeen, who's been charging his way from the back of the field after a disqualification in quali. Running out wide from behind him there, that's the 18 of Julio Bahena. Dan Junior Poulon with Lamborghini in 16th place, the only surviving Lambo so far. As trouble for both Bayer and Schimpf earlier on. Brooklyn Donkin in 17th place, Till Schwering in 18th, Casey Miles 19th, and Rafael Bayer, aforementioned there. Troubles for the Lambo, now down to 20th. Gino Latore not far from his position at the moment in the number 47. He's in 21st place, 22nd for Christophe Dupois, 23rd for Maximilian Schimpf, and then 24th right behind him there is Michael Purvis. Looking back towards that potential fight on the podium, it is still very, very close here between the 3 German powerhouses, BMW, Audi and Porsche. Namely, it's been closer for that fight of second than it has been for the race lead so far. Strategy will have to be the sort of upper hand a lot of these drivers need to start thinking about to try and get the leg up over the 77 in the next hour and 54 minutes of racing here in Imola. Looking further down the line, we can see Hernandez starting to gain a little bit of ground here on the Bentley. Battle of the V8 juggernauts coming up here, as not too far behind him you can see that Aston Martin, and then not too far behind him is the Ford Mustang, what has been a dominant figurehead on the Assetto Corsa Competizione community grid for quite some time. Vincent Simard potentially looking to ramp up the intensity on his teammate here. David Tanguay in 5th for the Malwar Racing team. Now, to briefly touch on how the team scoring works, it's very similar to how it's operated in the NLRL Sunday League, so very similar regs there. The top 2 of each team will contribute towards the team standings. We'll pick up on that at the second round of the championship after Christmas on December 28th. See, though, it starts to become a 3-way fight just towards the back of the podium here, and then outside of it, with Lucas Kostra gaining ground on Alan Alexander. A 3-way split here, the 996, the 315, and the 46, all squabbling for second. Meanwhile, it's been easy and... Oh, never mind, I was about to say easy and breezy. What on earth has happened here? Luca Gornheimer, trouble out of Piratella. I was about to say, and I've been hit with one of the worst strokes of luck with that one, and so too has Gornheimer. Drops down to 9th. Actually, that could be down to 10th as up the road. Yes, that is Charlie Harker. So that is 10th place for Luca Gornheimer. What has happened for him there? I think we could realistically assume he spun the car on the run down towards the Aqua Minerale just on the exit of Piratella. He's caught the curbs and the car has snaked out on him. That's not the first time we've seen an issue like that. We saw it earlier on for Rafael Bayer with Lamborghini. I was not expecting BMW to be hit with such hardship early on. But what it has given is Alan Alexander, after a move we sadly didn't get to catch over Zalan Such, it's given him the race lead. That has been a real sudden shock to the system for both us and I imagine as well for that 77. Let's see if we can go and catch on board with the former race leader. He finds himself tucked in right now just behind Charlie Harker's Aston Martin on their way down towards Tambirello. It has been quite an interesting start indeed. For Gornheimer though, damage looks minimal. So with any hopes, he'll still be able to continue to charge. We know he has the pace for it. Let's see what he can do, as he's now going to find himself in a very tough spot, as not too far from his current position trying to claw his way through the grid is the 696. Speaking of, let's see if we can go and catch on board with Skino. Currently 15th, still fighting with Bahena. Now, you've got to hand it off here to that number 18. We see off in the background there being forced to run over the Variante Villeneuve. That is Richard Cecil, the number 55 with Honda. Tries his way up the inside here on the 696. He's on the outside of the number 18. These three getting into a bit of a tit-for-tat fight here for 13th. Let's stay on board here. This could be quite an exciting one. We're on board with the AMG of Ian Skeen, competing with Garage 93 Racing. A little bit of washout there over the nose for the Mercedes. Now, we've seen understeer to be a bit of a concern for Mercedes in the wet. But in the hands of Skeen, we've seen him to be quite the veteran with the AMG. A bit of a bump there up the backside for Julio Bahena. urging him to get a move on here. He's already made the accolade of a top 15, and he made that one very, very easy at the start of this race. In the opening 10 minutes, we find a little stab of oversteer for him on the exit of the Variante Alta. Off in the background there, big send out. That's, I believe, Till Schwering in the number 1. Very bizarre stuff indeed. Making our way then down towards Ravazza, not trying... Oh, actually, no, he is trying his way to the inside. So a double fake out for the 696 and contact between Skeen and Bahena. These two have been elbows out for quite some time here. And what it does force is Bahena down into an onslaught here. 3 cars looking to absolutely rip him apart. The 55 now up and ahead of him. That's Richard Cecil with Honda. Right behind him, actually to his side there, was contact between Brooklyn Donkin and Julio Bahena. And I believe Donkin dropped down a position, down behind, by looks of it there, Dan Jr. Poulin with Lamborghini. Looking here with Richard Cecil, he runs wide in towards Tamburello. He's forced to cut and then rejoins right alongside the 18. It's contact between Bahena and Cecil. Into the wall goes the Honda. Oh, no, no, no. Get a look at this one here. In his efforts to rejoin the track, we saw he just underpinned the brakes, had to force his way over, rejoined, and there it looked almost like the 18 moved out to the right to try and give himself a bit more oomph through the next corner. A little hard to tell from our point of view on the cameras. The bottom line, though, the 55 knocked asunder. Looking back up for what is the current scope of the podium, the 55 running into even more trouble, this time down at the Variante Villeneuve. Could that be the end of the line here early on for the Honda? We also see the 39 Christophe Dupois in trouble with Lexus. You see here, this is the scope of the podium right now. On board with Zalan Such in the number 996 Audi, chasing down Alan Alexander, the newfound race leader after the incident down at Piratella for the leading 77 of Luca Kornheimer. Lucas Kostra not too far from his position. Let's see if we can go and get a look around the track for the nearest fights going on at the moment. These three find themselves in ample stalemate at this time. Getting a look around the field. See here, this is Gino Latore. Behind him there, not too far off, is Casey Malz. Down towards the Variante Alta they go. Do see a little bit of damage there for Till Schwering's number 1 Ferrari. Meanwhile, behind him, we could see a fight going on between Bahena and what looks to be Rafael Bayer. The 55 in trouble again, this time out of the Variante Alta. That's 3 chicanes in a row now where there has been trouble for the Honda of Richard Cecil. Do you see here, this is the fight between Bayer and Bahena. These are 2 fated manufacturers and leaping for the inside, the number 18. What kind of line do you call that? That's a bit of a joker lap from Bahena. Cuts his way across the track, allows Rafael Bayer back out in front. What on earth happened there? I've seen attempts to brake before. That weren't one of them. Heading down through the Variante Villeneuve. Down towards Tosa. Bayer holds on to 17th for the time being. You see here for Zalan Suchi is closing distance up on Alan Alexander. You got to hand it here to Alan Alexander. He's able to really defy the odds. As to mention a previous point from before, and it's been a point we've been repeating since Silverstone a couple weeks back. He's doing all of this in a Porsche, in the wet, on controller, up against grids of drivers who can sink thousands into their setup. So it is rather impressive to see he's able to go toe-to-toe with not 1 but 2 drivers careening up to his back end here, looking to take a stab at that race lead. You see in the background here, this is further down the line, even more trouble, and I believe there, after 2 laps back-to-back of continued troubles, the 55 is into the pit lane, so I believe this could be a DNF for Richard Cecil. What has been a swing and a miss on his choice for Honda. Dan Jr. Poulin. Now, this was an exciting one for us heading into this, as it was a very last-second change. Originally planned to race with Aston Martin, then changed his mind, moved to Lamborghini at the last second, where it didn't reward him as much as he thought it would over the course of qualifying. Poulin finds himself currently fighting with Brooklyn Donkin. Now, we've seen what that 17 can do over on the Sunday League. Now to see him with a new grid of drivers emerging of the minds here. Competizione Performance League meets several other leagues we've covered here on TRTN. It's brilliant to see so many drivers we recognise and have seen their work before go head-to-head under the iron veil of racing. You see here, potential fight coming up. Hernandez v Charlie Harker. This is an interesting one when you consider the fact that Mercedes and Aston Martin worked very close side by side on the development of their cars. For the V8 Vantage. It does feature the same engine as the road-going counterpart for that AMG up in front. Now, common misconception, one that we previously believed as well, is that the Mercedes, if we could go and catch on board with it, that being Hernandez at the moment, let's see if we can go and catch with the Merc, either of them being either Skeen or Hernandez. We catch here, very nearly contact as it stood between Harker and Hernandez. We'll watch on for this fight of 9th place, but getting on to a point we just started speaking of there. Common misconception, one that we believed for some time, was that this car uses the 4-litre M178 engine commonly found in the road-going Mercedes-AMG GT. Well, as it turns out, in the GT3 variant, that is not the case. It uses an older, naturally aspirated 6.3-litre V8 engine from the Mercedes SLS GT3. So they're still inheriting older technology on a much more optimized platform. Whereas the AMG GT4 uses the 4-litre, and then the export variant of that engine, the M177, is the one you find in that Aston Martin behind, currently being driven by the 33 of Charlie Harker. A little bit of interesting information, one that we've learned over the course of our time covering GT3 racing. We also saw, in the meantime, was trouble for the 39. That's Christophe Dupois, momentarily brought the yellow flags out down to the Aqua Minerale. Let's get a look back on board with what things are looking like up at the front. And it's the same old here, a bit more of a stalemate at play between the leading pair, the two German juggernauts, as it stands. Porsche and Audi leading outright. Both of them current family members of the Volkswagen Group. Very late on the brakes here. Suchi is looking to close that gap by any means necessary. We're watching on with that fight for first place. Let's stay on board with Zalan Such in the 996 on his way down through Aqua Minerale. Now, we saw it was stability concerns for Audi not too long ago. And it's the same story for their sister car, the Lamborghini Huracan. Inherits the same engine, the 5.2-litre naturally aspirated V10 unit. Lamborghini has since disbanded that into Temerario, opting for a twin-turbo V8. Audi has now since discontinued the R8 in its entirety. Rumours that it could return to the auto market are slimly believed. We hope that personally Audi could bring back the R8. It was one of their best cars going. I remember when I was very little wanting the first generation Audi R8 as it appeared in all of the films I used to watch. Probably one of its most popular appearances in film and media was in Iron Man, and the first ever of what has now come to known as the Marvel Cinematic Universe tie-in films. Or line of films, I should say. But more on racing here, less so on movies. We see here this is about to be a movie in and of itself. A fight for first is a big switchback and minor contact between Alexander and Such. It puts the Audi potentially up to the lead. We see Alexander cutting across the track, back out in front of the Audi. All's fair in love and war here, and what it does invite in, have a look at this. Here comes Lucas Konstra with McLaren. He's up on the inside here of Zalan Such. It's contact between the pair. They collide at Villeneuve. It's absolute bedlam in Sector 1. Oh my goodness, get a look on the replays here as we head in towards Tosa with Zalan Such. He now falls in behind Luca Goenheimer, who's challenging James Mason for position. This is the contact in the middle of your screens here. Such versus Konstra down towards Villeneuve, turned around by the 46. Looking further down the field, we see Dan Junior Poulon still fighting in and amongst this pack, but now joined by his fellow Lamborghini, Rafael Bayer of Black Nitro Racing in the number 28. It could be Lambo v Lambo here with a little bit of desync because we've just come back from the replays. That's not server side, that's our problem and our cross to bear. Oh, big slide out just as we caught there. Charlie Harker drops down to 10th place. Now much further behind that of Sergio Hernandez than he'd like to be. Something we want to pick up on, though, was this fight we saw, much to the chagrin at the time for that of Zalan Such, was the fight going on just from behind him here between these two BMWs. Looking up the inside goes Luca Goenheimer on James Mason. 5-star versus exclusive. Now, this has been a long-lasting rivalry here. Back when they were known as K1 Esports, they went head-to-head with exclusive all the way back when in our early days in commentary in the GHR Xbox Endurance Championship, and that rivalry still lives on, at least in spirit today, in races like these. Goenheimer up to 5th. Mason is not letting that one go without a very good fight here. He'll be looking for an imminent comeback to it. Very late on the brakes, does give a bump there to the 77, so forced to cut the Variante Tambirello. Luca Goenheimer drops in behind both Mason and Such. He's not going to be happy with that one at all. We've also got wind of another incident having gone on not too long ago for the 47 out of the Variante Alta. We watch here with Luca Goenheimer caught in the front row seats to a fight he once led. As now we see contact between himself and Talan Such closed in by the 996. He's really got his elbows out now. That does invite Christian Lebay into this squad for 5th place. Now up the road from Talan Such, the Bentley makes up 7th place. 20 minutes of racing we're in so far, and it has been proper white-knuckled stuff here in the world of GT3. Down towards the Aqua Minerale. The 315 still leading that charge. A huge step out for the 413. Mason runs out wide. Goenheimer gets up and alongside him, but before we hit Variante Alta, the 77 is up into 5th place. Incident down the line there for the 51. We've also seen as well. So far, it's been explosive racing in that opening 20 minutes. Bear in mind, they are nowhere near the halfway mark here. They're still in for the long run in Imola, and so too are we. It has been an incredible start by all accounts, as we see here, caught in the middle of it all, between a rock and a hard place. Meanwhile, we do have yellow flags out down at the Aqua Minerale section. The number 18 of Julio Bahena and the number 28 we're trying to catch on board with here of Rafael Bayer with Lamborghini. Both of them caught up in some kind of incident. Of course, we did see them battling not too long ago. It's now since resolved itself. But the 18 just ran off at Alta and is now back into the pit. And I believe the number 18 of Julio Bahena could be a DNF in this race. That'd be our 2nd DNF so far after the 55. And yes, the 18 is out. Imola has been a very tough one so far, make no mistake of it, and we're only in for worse runnings on our way into Monza, the Temple of Speed, what is also a Cathedral of Carnage, some could make the argument, in the world of GT3 racing. If it was anything to go by in the XCL Pro Series yesterday, we saw quite a hectic race in Monza. Actually, a lot more incidents were happening down at Ascari from what I was able to see last night in their stream than there was down at the more expected areas like the Variante Rettifilo and the Variante della Roggia. Right now, though, we see here some potential side-by-side action on the way here. Lebay has got the benefit here. Better BOP with Bentley, and moreover, much, much larger car, larger in charge for that fight of 7th place. He's got mass to his aid here. He can easily deny room to the Audi. However, he is putting himself in the firing line of what is an already very irritated Talan Such. Staying on board here with the Bentley. In the pit lane comes the number 28. Rafael Bayer is in. On board with Lebay. This is in the fight for 7th place at the moment, running down through Ravazza. Bear in mind, if you can get a wriggle on here in the straightaways, the Bentley's no slouch in a straight line, and we'll pick up more on that conversation next week on December 28th when we head over to the Temple of Speed, as we have all the data to provide in terms of those straight line speed. We'll have potentially even more than what we've had in the last couple of months in our visits various times to Monza. See there, looking his way up the inside. You've got to hand it here to Talan Such. He is up against veterans of this league, and he is not afraid to get his elbows out to find even the slightest of gaps and to try his way up. Up the order there, we had some trouble for, I'm trying to take a look here, I believe that to have been the 36. I'll have to double check. Heading down towards Tosa. Meanwhile, in the background, just to pick up on something we saw earlier on, Hernandez and Harker are back into a fight. Now Harker leading ahead of Hernandez. Those two separated by 0.3 of a second. 1 hour, 37 left to go here in Imola. Barely scratching the surface of what has already been an epic start to this winter mini-series here in the Triple Crown Enduro. Down towards Aqua Minerale. Now, this is an area that Lebay knows that Such has to tiptoe around. It's been a paramount issue for the mid-engine cars, namely the Lambo and the Audi have suffered the same cruel stroke of fate heading down through these more technical sections where stability is really not on their side, and that is rather in the opposite direction for Bentley. They are really able to tank a lot of these curbs, being one of the larger cars on the field. Now, don't mistake its size for mass, as moreover, we did, to be fair, we did that earlier on by saying he's got mass to his aid. He's got size to his aid. But don't mistake that size for direct mass. It's actually one of the lighter cars on this field, and a very bizarre work of engineering by the folks over at Bentley. Moreover, this car was co-engineered by M Sport, the same people who currently produce the Ford Puma Rally 1 in the World Rally Championship. More on this fight later on as it starts to dissipate. Let's get a look on a fight going on not too far away here. We're looking at the fight of 13th place. Battle of the Mustangs. Martel v Donkin. We've also got the topic there of Harker v Hernandez. We'll be getting onto that as and when we can. We just quickly see here with the two Mustangs, Brooklyn Donkin chasing Carl Martel, the number 17 there, the blue, with Euro Titans versus the 99 in red. Very late on the brakes there goes Carl Martel, and almost like clockwork there, runs over and loses the position out to Donkin. Took a gamble, and it just sadly didn't pay off for him. Looking here up at the front row, Alexander and Kolstra starting to toe the line away from Tanguay and Simard in the 30 and the 120. A little stab of oversteer there. The 46 forces a wedge now 6/10 of a second between himself and Alan Alexander, who still leads here after 25 minutes of racing. The 39 in trouble is about to be lapped. That's Christophe Dupois with Lexus, making our way down towards the Variante Alta. Luca Gornheimer looming in the distance here in a race he once led. 77 is in pursuit of, already looking at it there, 4th place, Vincent Simard. Now, we've seen towards the end of the Jaguar series, he's no pushover, and when push comes to shove here, he is really going to be able to put on a great fight, especially with that Lexus, knowing he's one of 3 cars with superior straight line speed in venues like these. The 28 in trouble again between the two opening Variantes, between Tamburello and Villeneuve. That's Rafael Bayer again. It's a repeat theme here in the wet, and on a technical track like Imola, Lamborghini is faltering. Off in the background there, who was that? We just saw someone pushed all the way out wide, and by the looks of it there, that was Christophe Dupois. We see at the moment, Charlie Harker now breaks a second away from Sergio Hernandez in the number 998. Looking here, the 696 of Ian Skeen just down in 11th place. So he's nearly into that top 10. He's just over halfway up the grid. So he's already made quite a solid effort in the opening hour of racing here in the 2 hours of Imola. See here, this has been a repeat offence for the 28. Rafael Bayer really up against the ropes with that Lamborghini, showing the signs of its age. There were real defining reasons behind why Lamborghini had to redouble their efforts, had to go with some radical reforms to what their car was going to be looking like heading into the mid-2020s, because the Huracan, we can definitely see it now, is a car a little bit out of its element. It's a fish out of water situation for the 28, and cars like him, the 78 and the 44, all struggling with stability concerns throughout this race so far. One of the Volkswagen Group cars not suffering so much for stability concerns, unless you count the time that he was spun out down at the Variante Villeneuve, is that of Zelan Soch's Audi R8 LMS Evo 2. Contrary to popular belief, for some of those maybe uninitiated with GT3 racing, no, this does not feature the Audi Quattro all-wheel drive system, of course strictly forbidden under GT3 regulations, but you'd not be mistaken in assuming that it maybe did, with the kind of punch this thing has right off the bat. In terms of uphill torque, it does tend to struggle being on the naturally aspirated roster. The turbocharged engines and the twin-turbo engines get a little bit extra kick out through turn 7 at Tosa. But on level ground, the Audi's not actually too bad on reflection there. See in the background, Hernandez up ahead of Harker. Let's get a look here. Charlie Harker versus Sergio Hernandez. V8 versus V8. AMG versus Aston Martin. Fun fact about that livery as well, of course, the heart of racing. And that was co-founded, if I'm not mistaken, by Gabe Newell, the founder of Valve. Same company who created the Half-Life and Portal games. Down through the Variante Tamburello, Hernandez takes position to 9th there. Runs a little bit out wide, so there could be the move up the inside. It's going to have to be quite lofty here for the Aston Martin to hold position in towards Villeneuve. Trying to switch back in the Mercedes of Hernandez, but a great move by Harker. There could be a third part to this saga heading down towards Tosa. But looking at it there, single file through the 33 from the 998, running out wide though, goes Harker. So here comes Hernandez, back up to 9th. This is a brilliant fight here between the Aston and the Mercedes. Meanwhile, the 47 brings out yellow flags down at the Aqua Minerale. Let's stay on board with Charlie Harker. This has been a brilliant scrap between himself and Sergio Hernandez for 9th place. Very nearly a bit of contact there. We're on board with the 33 down towards turns 10 and 11. Oh, a big step out there, spinning out, catching the water. That was Sergio Hernandez. Get a look on the replays there. The other car in trouble was Gino Latore, we've just found out. But take a look at this. On the run down towards Acqua Minerale in this area of compression, under the brakes, gets over the curbs, there catches some standing water on the left-hand side, and that was enough to put him halfway into a spin for Sergio Hernandez. Big trouble indeed for Charlie Harker. He's not going to be seeing too much of a detriment to all of that. Realistically, up to 9th place, he's going to be rather happy then that he's got some decent breathing room between himself and the Mercedes. Now 4.3 seconds as they exit Ravazza. A little bit of desync as we caught back on with them. That's just a routine case for us here on TRTN. That's just the way the technology works for us, sadly. Looking here, this is the fight on the back of the podium. David Tanguay with Maloir Racing Bentley currently in 3rd place. His teammate Vincent Simard with Lexus in the number 120 car just right behind him. And there you can see looming in the background that purple shadow just looming over these two. That's the 77, Luca Gornheimer, who started from pole, was knocked down a peg down through Piratella towards Acqua Minerale, and he's back for revenge only 30 minutes later. Meanwhile, in the talk of things up at the front, Alan Alexander is starting to open the taps here over Lucas Kosdra. A gap of about 1.3 seconds we're looking at on the front row between the Porsche and the McLaren. Watching with Tanguay. The local talents here of Competizione Performance League have been no pushovers in today's race. They find themselves comprised in the entirety of that second row. Tanguay and Simard, two rising stars through their time in the Jaguar Series. Simard having made his debut in the Jaguar Series, Tanguay making his debut back in GT4, but had a real stroke of good results throughout the Jaguar GT3 Revival Series over the course of the last 9 weeks here on Competizione Performance League. It is quite a surprise then to be coming back to you so soon. Watching here with bated breath, we know what Lexus is capable of in a straight line. Now, data out of Monza reveals they're at level pegging with BMW and Ford for the fastest cars in a straight line. And since he's already in the slipstream of that Bentley, taking it down towards Tamburello, he might just be cut short of an advance up towards 3rd place, but he's going to have a go of it down through Tamburello. Oh, what's gone on there? Was that a disconnect, I believe? Oh, no. Let's get a look at this on the replays very quickly here to see if anything does change in the meantime. And it does appear that that Lexus of Vincent Simard has run into connection troubles. We'll watch it here as he just sort of blips out of existence there, and off he goes. Very bizarre indeed. Well, what that does leave us at the moment is in a bit of an odd spot. It leaves Tanguay off by his lonesome in 3rd. It also cuts down the gap between himself and Gornheimer. Nothing left to stand in the 77's way on his procession back to a potential podium. Cut away here to take a look on with one of the other Bentleys. Still looking up at a chance of 6th place over Zalan Such's 996 Audi. This is the 119 of Christian Lebay. Of course, winner and champion of the Competizione Performance League GT4 Pro-Am Cup America Series and the Jaguar GT3 Revival. A 2-time champion here in this league, and not too far off a shout of a top 5 right now. 1.8 seconds away from the top 5 car, James Mason, in the 413 5-star eSports BMW. So after just over a half an hour of racing here in Imola, we do find ourselves with a very dramatic change of events. Alan Alexander leads by 2.8 seconds over Lucas Kosdra in 2nd. David Tanguay 3rd, hanging in the balance for a chance to return to the podium then, who started from pole position, still with the fastest lap of the race so far. Luca Gornheimer in the 77 BMW. Behind him, James Mason in the 413. Zalan Such not too far off a chance of being back into the top 5. Of course, did attempt his lead of this race, but was taken out down at Villeneuve by Lucas Kosdra in an incident not too long ago. He's 6th place at the moment. Behind him, Christian Lebay in 7th. Charlie Harker in 8th with Ian Skeen. Now into that top 10. Again, a silent procession for the Garage 93 Mercedes there. The number 696 of Skeen, racing in honour of Hudara 93, makes his way to 9th. Kevin Quain in 10th place, Sergio Hernandez in 11th, Brooklyn Donkin in 12th, with Carl Martel in 13th, Til Schwering 14th, Dan Junior Poulon in 15th, Maximilian Schimpf in 16th, Michael Purvis in 17th, Casey Miles in 18th, with Vincent Simard returning to us from his disconnect, now dropping down to 19th. That gives Miles 18th at this time. Dupois looking to make his way up to 19th in a moment's time with Lexus. Rafael Bayer in 21st for the time being. Gino Latore in the pit lane in the 47 Ferrari. And that makes 22nd on what was a 20, I believe, 24 car grid on today's race. The 39 in trouble. That's Christophe Dupois down at the Varianti, I believe, looking at it there, the Tambirello. Nearly runs into the sights here of the number 1 and the number 44. That's Til Schwering and Dan Junior Poulin. Back on with our fight going on here. David Tanguay has got a very likely chance to have a go on a fight for second. He does run a little bit out of room, so that does invite in. Here comes a fight for third. Luca Gornheimer looking up the inside on our way down towards Rivazza. It's Bentley versus Beamer on their way down towards turn 17, 18 and 19. Up the inside then goes Gornheimer. Has he short-sold himself on those brakes? The number 30 looking for a chance to fight back, but out through turn 18, it was very, very clean indeed by the 77. This is where he may have fallen into a bit of a trap. Yes, the BMW is one of the faster cars in a straightaway, but now caught firmly in his slipstream is that Bentley. So while Gornheimer will close the gap down towards Kostra, now up into third place, Tanguay is going to be glued to him on the run down towards Tambirello. Let's see if we can go and catch on board. We have a drive-through penalty for Vincent Simard, now having been released from the pit lane, so things gone from bad to worse there for the 120. See the 607 potentially to get in a fight soon with that of Sergio Hernandez, who's dropped down quite a few positions in his previous fight with Charlie Harker. One can wonder. Actually, we don't have to wonder. We did see that incident earlier. I just didn't think the damage was that severe. Taking a look here with Luca Gornheimer with BMW. Currently in that fight for second place. It's 3 cars in all for contention here. Lucas Kostra has quite the defending job ahead of him in that 46 McLaren. The 77 currently from third place, hunting him down with ruthless vigor here. He's been on a revenge drive since his incident down at Piratella. And a big snap of oversteer. And perhaps that could have been the catalyst for what caused his incident earlier. We just saw in the background for the number 30 of David Tanguay down in 4th. Most recently, having lost out that third position spot, was in a chance to have a go for position up here on that of the number 46. Meanwhile, yellow flags down at Villeneuve for the 99 of Karl Martel. That's since cleared itself once the Mustang is returned to the track. Down through the Variante Alta. This was the flashpoint for their fight of third place between Tanguay and Gornheimer. Last lap just gone. Taking a look then down towards Rivazza. The 46 only half a second away. That fight for second is still very lively. A little later onto the brakes as he'd like there for Luca Gornheimer. Bear in mind, not one driver has had a thought of coming into the pits. Now, we realistically could expect with an open strategy and only one mandated pit stop that everyone is at least gunning for that one-stop strategy. And it will come pretty much dead on at the 50% mark of this race. So in about 23 or so minutes time, we could expect to see drivers make their way into the pits for their one-and-done pit stop. Now, the question therein remains for a lot of drivers, it is going to be fuel, but will any of them take the consideration of tyres under their belt heading into that one pit stop? Bear in mind, the wets degrade at a much, much slower rate than their dry counterparts. That's not to say they're not wearing at all. The question therein remains is, can the drivers firm it in conditions that don't look to be changing too much in the next 30 or so minutes? We're staying on board with Gornheimer because the chances are still very, very rich for him here to have a go at second place over Lucas Kostra. As a matter of fact, let's see if we can catch on board with the defending McLaren. We have the 78 up in front that ran into some trouble. We're on board now with the number 46. Competing for the VR46 team is Lucas Kostra. If I'm not mistaken, this is the first ever Polish driver in Competizione Performance League history. We see in the background, though, a bit of an odd run out through the Acqua Minerale has now forced Luca Gornheimer far, far away from that of Lucas Kostra. Let's go back on board with the BMW here, as he now has to redouble his efforts to defend from the likes of the number 30, who has a little stab of oversteer there. David Tanguay has got a chance. Question is, can his car stand up to the challenge? We know plenty enough about the kind of driver that David Tanguay is. We know that when push comes to shove, he is a real soldier, and he has seen the worst of it out through Jaguars and has had some very, very good results throughout that last season. In his time with Bentley, though, up against a massively different grid of both drivers and cars alike, Can the Continental stand up to the challenge? Right now, the 30 is Bentley's final hope for good results out of this first round. For the Maloir Racing Team, he will be their top scorer. The next one will be the 119 down in 7th. That's Christian LeBay. Right now, though, as it stands, it's VR46 and Euro Titans Endurance on top in terms of available scorers, of course. Caught between a rock and a hard place. This is a tough call for Luca Gornheimer now. He can definitely pat himself on the back on the realization that in the span of just 40 minutes, he's managed to fight his way back towards the podium. But of course, ambition kills any kind of joy, and comparison is the death of joy as well. And he's going to be thinking very clearly now, well, I have 7.5 seconds between me and Alexander. It should be 0. And hopefully he doesn't find himself in a space to lose his head in his efforts to get up towards the lead of this race. We've seen that kill way too many drivers off in those long-winded performances. We saw it quite part and parcel throughout the console endurance series, where plenty of teams have struggled under this mindset. Bear in mind, he's not got any teammates to pass the load off to. This is all for Gornheimer's sake in the next hour and 20 minutes to make his way back to the race lead. The question remains, is it going to be possible for him with a driver like Alan Alexander out in front? We've just seen there off in the background, that was Tanguay. Was that a malfunction for the Bentley? He almost looked like he went straight on. Getting a look here. You still see the 77. Let's go and take a look with some of the other drivers on the grid at the moment. A potential fight coming up here between Purvis and, by the looks of it there, Bayer. Off in the background, that looked, yeah, it looked like a straight line. The wheels weren't turning at all for David Tanguay's Bentley. What's gone on there? Oh, it's Maximilian Schimpf, as a matter of fact. Raphael Bayer is down in 20th place, currently fighting with Christophe Dupois. 120 now having since served their drive-through penalty. Looking around the field, Kostra 1.2 seconds from Gornheimer. The desync not doing much justice to what is going on display here. That now since sorts itself out. Looking around the field to see where the nearest fights are coming from. Sergio Hernandez, in his time since fighting with that of Charlie Harker after his incident down at Aqua Minerale, has struggled to recuperate some of the pace he had earlier on in today. Could it be a tyres consideration for Mercedes in their upcoming pit stop in a roughly 19 minutes time is when it's expected to happen? That is definitely something weighing heavy on Hernandez's mind. The only other Mercedes in competition at the moment, Ian Skeen, in 8th place with Garage 93. Number 696 car making his way down towards Tosa, 4.6 seconds away from Harker. You mentioned him earlier, but this is Raphael Bayer with Black Nitro Racing. Significant damage there on the nose of that Huracan. What we've also seen to be a primary concern for the Volkswagen Group drivers from both Audi and Lamborghini has been stopping power on the Huracan and the R8. Since his previous incident, we've not seen anything since to have waylaid the chances of Raphael Bayer. Off in the background there, that was Purvis. That was Richard Purvis. Let's see if we can go and catch with that McLaren, see the aftermath of what just happened there. We saw it all the way off in the background, just caught a little bit of standing water on the right-hand side on the exit of Ravazza. And that sent him just for a brief knock with the wall. Doesn't look like anything too severe. He'll keep going. Last lap there, 156.180. Kostra, in the meantime, has now dropped down to 3rd place. Luca Gornheimer up to 2nd. And as you can see, on the nose of Lucas Kostra's car is significant front-end damage. Bear in mind, the gap's still quite large between himself and the nearest car down, being James Mason now to 4th place on this grid. What on earth had gone on there for Lucas Kostra? Only time will tell. We'll see whether or not that front-end damage is going to have a lasting effect on him throughout the rest of this hour and 17 minutes and 35 seconds of racing to follow. What it has done, though, is kicked open the gates on the idea that there is now nothing left to stand in the way between our leading pair. If we go and catch on board with the Porsche leading the charge at the moment, Alan Alexander, we've just been given word that the number 1 car, Til Schwering, 5-Star Esports' Ferrari, has been given a stop-go penalty for speeding in the pit lane. Now it is 5.2 seconds. This is the Requiem now. This is the doomsday clock, as it were, for Alan Alexander. He has led this race confidently for quite some time. And as we see already, that gap is starting to wane away. It was 5.2 seconds. We just saw it briefly below 5 seconds as we head now in towards Ravazza. 4.9 seconds under braking. That could expand back out just a little bit there for him in between the two braking zones. But there you can see what is definitely a positive trend in pace for the number 77 BMW. He is catching up to that Porsche. It is now residing as a case as it just blips back up to 5.2 seconds after a bit of an odd... Oh, hang on, just a tick here. 77. Oh, never mind. I think the data was just a little bit fuzzy for us there. It almost showed him up. It was very confusing because it put him up to nearly 15 seconds. I was like, I think he spun the car. No, not the case this time around. The 77 now starting to consistently drop below the 5-second mark, and he's starting to make more and more ground between himself and Alan Alexander. So he needs to try and settle into a rhythm here, knowing the BMW is, in terms of pace, just that little bit faster than him. But the case is, can he fight with the Porsche? We know the Porsche's got better stopping power over the BMW when in the right hands, and so far so good for Alan Alexander. I've got great faith that he can take the Porsche to good justice in this race so far. He's got about 15 minutes before the halfway mark, before he and likely the rest of the grid who haven't pitted so far would be expected to make their one and only pit stop. See, though, running into lap traffic, that's Michael Purvis. We saw that incident earlier in the background for the 51. And as we mentioned before, no significant damage, so there shouldn't be anything keeping him from making his way around out of Alan Alexander. Heading down towards the Variante Alta. Now, he's not moved over yet, not that he has to. Common misconception, really, in most motor racing series that you have to strictly move over under the blue flags. That is really a case-by-case basis, and it's mostly a stipulation out of Formula 1 where they're given a preset number of blue flags before it becomes a penalty. Endurance racing, it is just the responsibility of the lapping car to get that one nice, neat, and tidy. And anything nice, neat, and tidy has not come the way of the number 28, who's run into even more trouble. Stranded across the track, that's Rafael Bayer. Rejoining the track there, a little bit sketchy, but it leaves Alan Alexander with plenty enough space to continue his charge of the race lead. Now, just to speak back on that gap, we did see momentarily on the exit of Ravazza, it dropped up to about 5.7 seconds between himself and Luca Goenheimer. We'll see whether or not that's wholeheartedly the case heading into this lap. No, it's 3.8 seconds, so this is definitely a case of when, not if, Goenheimer will be on the rear end of that 315 Porsche leading this charge. This could be an exciting one. We'll catch on with them later on. Taking a look here towards the back of the top 5 as Lucas Kostra maintains 3rd place, but is now nearly 5 seconds out from Goenheimer after overtake. Still nursing nose damage and seemingly bleeding time to this one on screen here. James Mason has made his way not only back to the top 5, but is now on that 2nd row within a glance of a podium on the first race of 3 here in the Competizione Performance League Triple Crown Enduro Series. Making our way out through Tosa. 4-1-3, still with a point to prove here. Top scorer so far for the 5-star esports team. Also, just to note as well, having made his way to the top 5 has been that of Christian Lebay. A very silent procession for both of these two to have snuck their way back into the top 5. For Lebay, it was definitely a bit of an ambiguous drive for him with the Bentley. We've seen it to yield a mixture of results for both him and, by wider proxy, the Malois Racing team. But in the hands of Lebay at the moment, this is an experienced driver. He knows what to do with older style British machinery. He's done 4 seasons with the V12 Vantage over at Aston Martin on the NLRL Sunday League. So hopping into a slightly newer Bentley is not anything too unfamiliar to him. Right now being able to give a very good go at a defensive 5th place here over Zalan Such in the 996. Well, we're 3/4 of an hour into that first hour, taking a look at where things stand at the moment. We're in a bit of a Mexican standoff at the front row. Alan Alexander of Euro Titans Endurance versus Luca Goenheimer of Exclusive Esports. Lucas Kostra maintains 3rd place, but is bleeding time away to James Mason in 4th, Christian Lebay in 5th. Zalan Such in 6th place with Charlie Harker 7th, Ian Skeen in 8th. Started from the back, I should remind you as well. David Tanguay down in 9th place after his incident at the Variante Alta, where the car seemingly went straight on. I believe we still have that on the replay here as we stay on board with Lebay. This was the incident earlier for Tanguay, previously 4th place in this race, but as he made his way out of Alta, it was a very bizarre one. The car almost looked like it wasn't steering, so could it have been suggested that it was perhaps a malfunction that has put him now down to 9th place? Brooklyn Donkin in 10th with Sergio Hernandez in 11th. Kevin Quain in 12th place, Carl Martel in 13th, Dan Junior Poulon in 14th, Maximilian Schimpf in 15th, Michael Purvis 16th, Casey Mouth 17th, Christophe Dupois in 18th, Raphael Bayer 19th, and Vincent Simard in 20th. Just to pick back up here, what could be the scope of the fight up in the leading pack. We do see waylaid by traffic, namely the 51 of Michael Purvis there, getting up over the nose of the 77. Bit of a slide for the McLaren, not much he could have done in that way, but now lets the 77 roll on by, accidentally giving a lot more time over to Alan Alexander. Now that gap is seemingly returned north of 5 seconds in the scope of their fight since. Looking back on board with LeBay, the fight with Zalan Such in the 996. You got to give it to both of these drivers here. They're up against very uncertain odds. The Bentley we already saw was a bit of a mixed bag back in Silverstone for the Malwar Racing team when they competed in wet and wild conditions at the 6 Hours of Silverstone in the NLRL Console Endurance Series. Moreover, just to pick up on this point again, it has been a consistent issue across the board for the Volkswagen group from both Audi and Lamborghini cars of stability concerns in the wet. So it is quite respectable that despite all of the problems he's had in the last couple of laps here, namely the last sort of 30 or so minutes for Zalan Such, where he was riding high on the podium for some time, that he is still able to put up such an admirable fight in the R8, the last of its kind for Audi, before they up and completely left the world of endurance racing full stop. They withdrew their LMP1 program, then their GT3 factory program, now their entire basket, all of the eggs in the F1 basket. Going to be exciting to see where they go in 2026. Of course, we talked earlier that those final images got released for the 2026 F1 regs. Now, personally, from where I stand, it's been a long, long time since I've ever commentated for a Formula 1 race. Used to be quite infatuated with Formula 1 in the modern scape, but I'm really not too confident on those 2026 regs. I'm not sure about the viewers at home, but I just don't see it being what the sport needs. I think it's going to end up in a much more gimmicky territory than I think people need it to go. And it's ultimately just going to cost more to get less out of the cars in this instance. I understand that it cuts back on the cost cap, but we're already in the midst of a development war, and the season's not even started yet. There's already been the loophole discovered by, I think it was Mercedes and Red Bull powertrains. The rest of the grid's already boycotting it, and this is exactly the kind of road we're heading for, talking about those regs. We're just going to end up in another development war where teams are dumping hundreds of millions of euros into a couple hundredths of a second difference per lap. And it's going to be exactly like how things ended up towards the end of the 2010s, I want to say, actually, where teams were just funneling tons of money into very minimal changes. The whole nature of the last 5 years of regulation changes have been in the hopes to make the cars cheaper to manufacturers, to entice more manufacturers onto the grid. Then you look on the wider scale, and we'll get this rant out of the way, trust me, we will get this out of the way. But just looking on a wider scale, for a sport that's trying to encourage more manufacturers to enter, it is quite benign to me that any manufacturer who's tried to enter to be that 11th team on the grid has had to go through so many hoops in order to achieve so. It got to the point where, if I'm not mistaken, Cadillac was forced to approach the United States Senate, or the United States Congress, in order to accelerate their path into Formula 1. I'm not sure how a system can get that bureaucratic and still stand in the face that we want to promote more manufacturers to the field. Look at the World Rally Championship, for example. Their new regulation wave has just allowed for private tuners to come in. Project Rally 1 is set to go toe-to-toe with the likes of Toyota, Hyundai, and Ford. That is proper change, in my opinion, but we'll get onto that in another time. If I'm ever honoured enough to get onto a podcast with any of our leagues, then we'd be happy to go at length over something like that. In the meantime, we saw trouble for the 998 car. Now let's get a look as to how that's affected the grid so far. We are looking at a fight here, Kostra v Mason, with LeBay still not far behind, but in between him and this fight for the podium looks to be one of the lapped Lexus cars. I believe at that time, looking at it there, that could be, I want to say, is that, no, it's not Christophe Dupois, so it has to be Vincent Simard. Let's get on board with this fight for third. I think action firmly in the position here for these two. Meanwhile, in the topic of the fight going on between the leading pair, the 315 currently separated from the 77 by the 39. That's Christophe Dupois' Lexus currently stuck in the middle of the leading pair. It's much, much closer on that second row. Staying here with James Mason. Lapped traffic up in the way there. That's the 51, Michael Purvis. Very hard to see, though, from the point of view of the drivers here. An enormous amount of spray being generated as it looks like the rain has gotten worse heading in towards that second hour. We'll get a weather forecast coming up not far from now. But looking at it, out through Tambirello, both of the cars skating on ice. The 39 out in front, the car that previously stood between the 315 and the 77. You can see they're just tucked into the right-hand side after an issue on the exit of Tambirello. It's contact between Mason and Kostra at the same area where there was contact before between Such and Kostra. This area of the track has been soaked in blood throughout this race. Oh my goodness, let's see if we can get a look at that on the replays here. What on earth went on between these two? We just caught the trailing end of it there, but it was a huge knock. Perhaps wasn't expecting Kostra to brake or broke way too late. Whatever it was, Mason now up to third place, but at what cost? Now be an investigation. Had any mind be about it. 1 hour, 6 minutes left to go. We are hot on the advent here of the arrival of our first pit stops for the majority of the grid. Actually, speaking of, we do see that the 119 has took an early leap here. So what is the operating strategy for Christian LeBay? Brooklyn Donkin also into the pits here, trying the same cheeky strategy. Now, we'll see how well that rewards them as the 119 peels out of the pit lane there, rejoining the grid just outside of the top 10, about 16.5 seconds away from Dan Jr. Poulin, his teammate at the Malois Racing Team in the number 44 Lamborghini, was originally planned to be the number 44 Aston Martin. It's a curious strategy. Now, bear in mind, LeBay has tried early door strategies before on a much more extreme level. One such race that springs to mind was the Valencia double sprint in the NLRL Sunday League, where in which he went for a very early pit stop there, where it was on the brand new pit stop system that was just a stop and drop, a minimum 3.2 seconds by the rough estimates of it, but it was technically an uncapped stop time. And he was able to use that to elevate himself to great levels towards the end of that race amidst a lackluster qualifying, if memory serves correctly. It wasn't the best day for the V12, but strategy gave him the upper hand. Could that be the same story for today as we do see more drivers into the pit lane? Getting a look here. Also in the pit lane, Schimpf, Kostra, Harker, and Tangway, among several others there. Mal's also in the pit lane, as a matter of fact. The 96 just on his way out there with Team Raceline McLaren. Here comes Kostra then. So damage to the nose, still not entirely clued in as to what caused that in the first place. Was it a case that this was maybe carrying damage from the incident way back when, in the incident between himself and Zelan Such in the number 996? Or could it have been a case where he picked up damage not too long ago in his efforts to stay ahead of Luca Goenheimer, who now holds on to that previously held second place for Kostra? Tangway being in also means that Malwa's definitely considering strategy to their aid here. Kostra might be losing that position out to Charlie Harker. Yes, that is the case. The Aston Martin's got him through on the pit lane run. Of course, running the colours there of the Heart of Racing team, who now field the Valkyrie up in the IMSA Sports Car Championship. Aston Martin's foothold in the world of American endurance racing. Bear in mind, the Heart of Racing Valkyrie was able to pick up a podium in, I believe it was Petit Le Mans this season. So great stuff for them. That was over in Road Atlanta. Definitely one of the best liveries going for Aston Martin as well. That's just within a pretty good shout there. We see Tangway on his way out in the number 30. He drops in behind LeBay, but there's definitely method to the madness being considered here by Christian LeBay. That earlier pit stop still gives him at least the run here on a good handful of positions. At the very worst of it, if this doesn't pay off, he'll still be in the top 5. Looking at the gap, though, Quain only 22 seconds away, so the top 5 definitely guaranteed. But I think there's great chances up the road here for him to potentially see this up to a podium if he really plays his cards right. We know that there is a lot of deliberation behind his moves. He never is the kind of driver to make a panic decision unless he absolutely needs to. So a lot of this has been considered. He'll have done his homework heading into this one, knowing that it's not quite time to hop in the Jaguar like he'll be doing in Season 5 of the Sunday League. He still wants to play his cards down with Bentley, knowing it can do the extra mile over the Jaguar. It is the arguably better choice of the two when it comes to endurance racing. Looking around the field then, let's get a look on board with the leading car. Once again, back on board with Alan Alexander in that fantastically coloured 315. Previously made the claim that maybe that was based off of, and this was One suggestion by us, perhaps those colours based off of Gravedigger from Monster Jam. That was one suggestion, as it definitely does remind me a lot of them based off of that colour scheme. In towards the pit lane, though, goes that of Alan Alexander. You can see, though, staying out and now taking the lead of this race, the number 77 of Luca Gornheimer, back up to the lead after long last. But under strategy, will it stand for Exclusive Esports' number 77 car? Into the pits, then, we see here with Alexander. A little bit of trouble there getting to a full stop, but he's in. And there's the 77. Lost time under the wet and wild conditions here, as weather has definitely picked up heading into the second half. You can see it is much heavier than when it started about an hour ago. Gornheimer now leads, but he's leading on borrowed time here, sandwiched in between Harker and Kostra, 9th and 10th. Really does go to show the lengths to how far up the road he was compared to the rest of the grid, and that's the same story for Alan Alexander. James Mason currently second place, yet to have made his way to the pits. Delan Such in third with Audi. Same story there. The number 44 in a momentary spot above her. We do see here a fight going on between David Sangway and Michael Purvis. He Bentley around the outside. A little bit of a wobble there between the pair. Out through turn 7. Just in front of them, Brooklyn Donkin in 11th place with Euro Titans. Michael Purvis, this is a tough one. He's in a very awkward spot here. He's into that wet line down towards Piratella. That could have ended in tears. Fortunately, though, very early on the brakes, keeps himself out of harm's way. Still yet to have come into the pits, mind you. Looking around the field, Ian Skeen was one of the drivers to have taken an earlier pit stop as well. As we head in towards the direct halfway mark, the 607 is into the pit lane at the moment, so that pushes LeBay up an extra position. That 607 being Kevin Quain. We still see here no current verdict as to when the 77's coming in. Could this be the lap? No, is the simple answer there as we hit the session halfway. For Gornheimer, this is a tough one because he has fought vehemently to be back in the charge for the race win here in round 1 of 3. But under strategy, his goose may have just been cooked. The 77 now trying absolutely everything, throwing everything into these next couple of laps. Last lap, a 1:49.962. When you consider his fastest lap was about nearly 3 seconds faster. It really does go to show the conditions are not on the mend here in Imola. It is getting worse, and it will continue to get worse by the looks of it before the checkered flag drops here in round 1. In the pit lane comes James Mason. That leaves Zelan Such to inherit second place, but again, he's on borrowed time here. Strategy is not going to be to his aid much longer. When you consider as well, Alan Alexander is looking to head up into a potential third place here. It's going to be a race down towards the line, and I believe the 315, yes, you could just see soaring up ahead of him there, up to third place. Bear in mind, they've still got 2 cars up in front, yet to have made their own stops in this race so far. So with the 413 leaving the pit lane there, drops into 5th place behind this one here, Carl Martel, who we saw soar on by but a moment ago. Being intercepted just at the end of the pit lane there by Dan Junior Poulin in the 44 with Malwar Racing Lamborghini. It's going to be exciting to see what Lamborghini can do in the next couple of years now on the advent of their Temerario program. Of course, had its testing public debut in the Daytona tests not too long ago. That was definitely quite talk of the paddock to see what it could do. Oh, hang on a moment. That's the 99. That's Carl Martel in serious bedlam there. Overtaken by the 119 of Christian LeBay. Martel in serious disarray there. The 99, that's going to be a trip to the pits easily by the end of this lap. Tucks into the slipstream of his teammate to help give him an early doors tow back to the pits. 57 minutes left to go. We're over that session halfway. Bear in mind, 4 more pieces left to fall into the proverbial puzzle. 5 if you consider Simard's down in 16th place. Right now, we don't have a definitive understanding of the grid at large. The number 39 of Christophe Dupois just picked up a stop-go 30-second penalty for speeding in the pit lane. That's the second time today that this has happened to someone. So far, no indication from Gornheimer as to when he will pit. Stuck up behind at the moment, behind the Aston Martin number 33 of Charlie Harker in 8th place. leads by an extra lap here, 57 minutes to go. We've seen Goenheimer on a variety of lineups with the exclusive esports team over in the Console Endurance Series. Exclusive in continuing to expand their presence. Now, speaking on this as well, there were 2 more drivers from the exclusive lineup set to make their debuts here in this series. One driver previously having, I believe, competed before. We had his name on record, but I don't know if he ever made the appearance. But there are 2 more drivers, hopefully to follow on from Goenheimer's solo act here with the exclusive team. That being Tobias Sievert and Tyler Vermaak. Sadly couldn't make it to this first round of the championship, with hopes that they will be able to make it to round 2 at Monza after Christmas. Into the pits, though, goes Goenheimer. Zalan Such, he had a great run of the land so far. He knows under strategy he can't keep going on like this, and he will eventually lose the position out to Alan Alexander if he doesn't make an early move to the pit lane. But he's going to lead this race up and ahead of Luca Goenheimer. But much in the same story as we saw for the 77, it's on borrowed time. For Goenheimer, just want to point this out. He's still yet to have been taken out of the pit lane. He's not dropped off of his jacks just yet, but on the topic of the car nearest to him, currently stuck behind Casey Miles in 18th there, just being let on through by the 96. This is the 315 of Alan Alexander. Now, we know Goenheimer is refueling. That has definitely been the consideration for a lot of drivers here, but has it been that open strategy that's given the 77 the upper hand here? Because Alexander, on his way out through Ravazza, is not close enough to get up onto Goenheimer's 6 here as he makes his way down towards the end of the pit lane. You can see where the speed limiter ends. So now charging his way down towards the line. I can barely think of where this is going to go next for Alan Alexander, because this is all in that charge for the race lead as dropping off of the limiter. There goes Luca Goenheimer. Alexander emerges behind, but it's got more than enough momentum to go up and alongside and into the lead. By provisional point of view, that will be the lead, I should say, for Alexander. He's second. He's in the lead of that fight for second place. This will be for those who lead the charge outright in the next 54 minutes. So this is a very exciting turn. One of the closest exits to a pit lane we've ever seen between 2 drivers fighting for the lead of this race. Goenheimer drops in right behind Alexander. This is the worst case scenario, as strategy has actually been to Goenheimer's upper hand here, really. It's been to his favor, where we thought, and there were speculations about it, whether or not it wouldn't have been. It's been anything but, though. Make no mistake of it. Zalan Such, he still leads that charge. The 39 has its stop and go clear. The 44 of Dan Junior Poulan is in. Looking around the field here, we see a potential fight in the making, the 46 versus the 33. You can see the gap between them at the moment, just on either ends of that run out of Villeneuve. LeBay up into the top 5 at the moment. There is still the story, though, as to what could happen once the leading Audi comes in. Now, right now, the 996 of Zalan Such is on his way down towards Tosa at turn 7. We're on with Christian LeBay, who's on his way down through the Variante Alta here on track, on his way currently out through turns 14 and 15. Let's get back on board with that fight going on here, as it's now since swapped hands into the favor of Luca Goenheimer. But have a look here, as Alan Alexander is not going to be letting go of this one. He might not have the straight line speed, but this is what the Porsche does have, and it's stopping power. On the run in towards the run of the Variante Tambirello, maneuverability is on the Porsche side. He'll be able to stick with religious commitment to the racing line here, gasping at available opportunities to attack that BMW. Down towards Villeneuve we go. This is the view of it from the onboard of Alan Alexander in the fight of second place. Very little visibility to be concerned with at all. A little stab of oversteer there for Luca Goenheimer on his way down towards turn 7, holds center mass of the road. Ultimately will be losing momentum. Not that he needs it in the fight uphill. He's got it over Porsche. Twin turbo inline 6 versus naturally aspirated flat 6. The fight on 6 cylinders on their way in towards turn 9 and 10 at Piratella. This was the same area of the track that caught him out not too long ago in today's race. He's not going to be fooled again. He's not going to be making those same mistakes. Now on our way in towards the Aqua Minerale. This was the same area of the track we saw a big half spin for Sergio Hernandez with Mercedes earlier on. it's still massively up in the air as to who can lead here in Imola. It has been a very, very close fight so far. These two pushing it right to the ragged edge on a track that is no longer favouring their safe survival. Now half a second north of Alexander. Gornheimer is opening the taps up here, and I fear that falling out of the slipstream range is going to be a death sentence for Porsche and Alan Alexander. As you can see, now a little further back than where they'd like to be heading into this next lap coming. You can see that that gap will only continue to rise against them on their way in towards lap 37. In that last lap, they're half a second faster. Gornheimer easily spreading the wings there on the 77 and soaring away with the provisional lead of this race. We're still yet to see the verdict off of the 996 as Alan Such still leading with Audi. Right now, this has been the talk of the town. Alan Alexander versus Luca Gornheimer for second place. This will effectively be for the lead. Now, we'll see how long that stands for. Of course, we know the Audi is going to need to... Oh, hang on a moment. We were about to catch on with that. There was an incident for the 46. Lucas Kostra is now out of this race. That marks yet another DNF for what has been a rising death toll here in the first of 3 rounds at the Competizione Performance League Triple Crown Enduro Series. Of course, with world-class talent comes world-class drama, and it has been quite the rip-roaring ride here in Imola for the first of 3. The next time you'll see us will be after Christmas on December 28th as we head to the Temple of Speed, the Autodromo Nazionale di Monza. The season finale coming up on January 3rd, the first race for us in 2026, and that's at the Suzuka International Racing Course in Mie Prefecture, Japan. Bit of a stab of oversteer in and then out of the Variante Alta for Alan Alexander, and I think that may have just signed the death warrant for his control of all things concerning the race lead. He'll be preying on an incident for the 77 that now leads the charge. Bear in mind, we still have to consider what is the current stakes for the 996. Alan Such, with that 5.2 litre Audi, is going to be finding himself in a bit of a spot of bother when he comes into the pits here. He's just about halfway up the track from these two. As we've seen, that is a gap more than easy to close down. When we were talking about the case earlier of Alexander intercepting Gornheimer on the exit of the pits a few laps back. And through Tambirello we go. The 77 from the 315 now 1.5 seconds nearabouts. And the exit of Tambirello. We'll catch up with these two later on. We see further down the line at the moment is James Mason. But in the grand scope of things, he has actually gained a few positions from that race start. 4th place now for 5-Star Esports. And if anything goes awry for that leading Audi, it could be 3rd for the 413. Bear in mind, not far from his current position, closer to him than he is to Alexander, is Christian Lebay. 7.1 seconds down the road with Malwar Racing Bentley. Having to avenge the losses there from the number 30 of David Tanguay, originally their primary point scorer. Now Lebay takes up the slack. This is the view on board from the Garage 93 car. Sorry, I keep saying Garage 39. That's our mistake. Garage 93 car. That's Ian Skeen racing in memory of Darren 93. Bear in mind that Skeen has started from the back of the grid today, so for him to be finding his way into the top 10, even by any scope of the imagination, is quite an admirable effort there by the Brit. Normally we see him driving with Euro Titans, decided to commemorate this drive to Darren 93, who sadly not long ago passed away. He was a very close friend to a great many in this community. Now his legacy lives on with Garage 93, currently heralded by Ian Skeen. Now, this is something that took me quite a while to pick up on, and it's for Rafael Bayer. Now, there are Lamborghinis on this grid, and we've seen plenty of them, mind you. But get a look here, and this is something I want to point out. So this is from Zalan Such's point of view. You can see in front of him there, another Lamborghini. That's Maximilian Schimpf. Now, it's a little hard to see, but that's the Evo 2 model. So it leaves, to my mind, to wonder, what on earth is Rafael Bayer doing in the previous spec Huracan? This took this long for us to clock on. Normally, when we see people enter a Lamborghini, it's in the Evo 2. But this is the earlier model Huracan. GT3. It took a while to pick up on, and I think really the early telltale signs should have been that roof scoop not being present on Bayer's car, but that is quite an interesting one. That is a long old time since any of us have seen that model. I believe last time would have been, oh goodness, back in Season 2, Season 3 of the TRR Sprint Series, back with few drivers. Among them, I think towards Season 4, we had Paul Muller driving in Lamborghini, but I think that was with the Evo 2. Looking all the way back, it probably would have been, what, the Le Torre team back in Season 3 with the original Huracan. Zalan Shorts, how do you say his name again? Such into the pit lane. Bear in mind, we had to Google that pronunciation, so if it is wrong, please do feel free to get in touch, as it's something we still try to strive towards in every broadcast, is making sure that we don't butcher the names of every driver on the grid. Well, Zalan Such in the pit lane at the moment. We'll see how that affects the fate of the wider scope of things from the podium's point of view. Goenheimer now firmly carving time away from Alexander, so he's on his way towards the line here to retake the race lead after long last. Vengeance arrives for the 77. He across the line here on towards the next lap as he takes the lead of the charge once more. He started from pole, and now, after nearly an hour and a half's worth of racing, it's an hour and 15 thereabouts, he finally retakes that leading mantle. Alan Alexander up to second, James Mason up to third, so it could be a podium on the cards here for 5-star. LeBay looking at fourth. Such leaving the pit lane at the moment. Off he goes there and rejoins the field just behind, by what looks of it there, yes, behind LeBay, so he'll be down in 5th place. See here, one that has been a very quiet adversary for most of the grid here, Charlie Harker. Now, we saw him in a handful of fights not long ago with Sergio Hernandez. But for the 33, it's been a silent hustle for Aston Martin to get their way up through the field here. He's looking at a very respectable 6th place finish. And comparing to where he started this race from, where he was starting, I think it was just either toward the back of, or if not outside of the top 10, to find himself again within a good point scoring position, it's nothing to scoff at in the long run. And he's definitely done quite a stand-up job to put himself in that position. We see here a fight between Simard and Purvis down towards turn 7. Bear in mind, Vincent Simard is yet to take his mandatory pit stop. 44.5 minutes left to go. One potential fight to monitor in the near future here, as we're down to the final 3/4 of an hour of racing here in round 1. Could be this one coming up, 30 versus 17, Tanguay and Donkin for 7th place. Bentley versus Ford. That could be quite an exciting one. We are looking at a close gap nearby. Again, that is the 120 versus the 51 now on the exit of the Varianti Alta. Michael Purvis with 5-star versus Vincent Simard with Malwa Racing. Down through to Rivazza. See here the 120 looking for a stab up the inside, cut off there. His momentum just snipped away, running out wide for the 2nd time, though the 51 is getting increasingly more and more vulnerable, and this is the major takeaway from it, because now that we're getting into the straightaways, that Lexus just gets to run off with it. Vincent Simard, despite yet taking his final mandatory pit stop, still finds himself fighting for position. He's up to 13th over Michael Purvis. Getting a look back up towards the scope of things in and around the top 10. It's a very quiet show so far. Of course, there is that consideration for the future fight of 7th. You can see the 2 drivers involved physically in the same scope of the screen here on the exit of Tambirello. Not too far a distance at all, 3.5 seconds potentially to close. We see here at the moment now what is of the 2nd row. LeBay and Mason both making great moves throughout today's session to make their way onto the top 5. This is going to be another one to potentially consider. Zalan Such versus Christian LeBay. This could be one on the cards as well. We had that suggested there by HCR Anthony in chat. And it definitely could open up some opportunities. Currently, the gap, 8.9 seconds. It is closing. There is something to note of all this, that it is closing in favor of the Audi. Current buffer zone being enforced by the 99 down in 12th place. Karl Martel stuck in between the two. So that'll be the first obstacle the 996 needs to navigate. But fortunately, being stuck up behind a Ford on a track like this is not the worst case. Knowing that straight line speed isn't a primary fitting point for Audi or Bentley, he knows that he can at least surf for the time being a little bit of that slipstream from the 99 to help slingshot his way up into a grander fight for 4th place. That is definitely something to consider heading in to the next 41 minutes of racing. See David Tanguay having since got around Michael Purvis. That leaves Vincent Simard off by his lonesome. Still yet to have taken his pit stop, so it does leave things rather ambiguous for the future of that 120. Speaking of the Manoir Racing team, though, we see here the 99 of Karl Martel. And this was the driver stuck in between the fight for 4th as he now moves over after the exit of Tosa. And looks to be almost a little bit on a half throttle there, then backs off just a little bit up through the hill to allow Zalan Such up in through. For a lot of drivers, though, obviously with larger races and more strategy-focused midway marks and less structure, as we would see in other series, to where we've only really got one mandatory pit stop. Everything thereafter is completely voluntary. For a lot of drivers here, they do find themselves stranded out by the lonesome, forced to fight on consistency alone. See over the scope of that last lap, just a second faster. Luca Gornheimer is really opening the taps up on that 77 now. He has been driving with steadfast conviction to one day return to the lead after an incident by his own account out through Piratella in towards Acqua Minerale, and he has delivered on what's to look to be throughout today's race an insurmountable task made possible by that 77. So you've got to hand it off here to Luca Gornheimer. The next 40 minutes are still yet written, but for the 77, it has been a brilliant race so far. An hour and 20 minutes into this race, he's back up to the lead. See here, Ian Skeen navigating traffic out past Rafael Bayer. Sandwiched in between two Lamborghinis of two different generations here, 8.8 seconds up the road from him is Maximilian Schimpf in the 78. That's the Evo 2 model. We've got the previous gen behind him there, Rafael Bayer of Black Nitro Racing. We did have a moment there for the 51. That's Michael Purvis. Now drops in behind Schimpf. And has actually lost quite a bit of time here over Skeen. So he might accidentally find himself over the nose of this Mercedes, the Garage 93 car. Not far from now, he makes his way in towards lap 43. And now, with no buffer zone between them, Martel now to his south. Zalan Such has clear line of sight over the 119. He's able to open the taps up here. 5.2 litres versus 4. Twin turbos versus nothing. E10 versus V8. A very iconic note indeed from the past of GT3. I mean, it is still quite a shame that the V10 is gone from the grid, and a very little likelihood for it to ever really return to endurance racing. The V10 really had its last breath with Audi and Lamborghini. A legendary engine known the world over in motorsports. It's been in so many different series, and every single time it's been among the best sounding engines on any grid. This was sort of its last hurrah, that 5.2 litre engine. Even back in its earlier life as the 5 litre, the previous unit that was found on the Lamborghini Gallardo, I mean, that was an absolute roarer. It was a brilliant engine. A brilliant engine. But the pros just aren't good enough. The cons often outweigh the pros. The engines, they don't make enough power for what the teams want. And this is kind of the same thing that took the V12 out of mainline circulation. It's why it finds itself in a rather niche position. Very few teams are able to make large engines beyond 8 cylinders work anymore. They make too much heat. They're too big. And often the cons outweigh the pros. It's why pretty much every team now is either considering the compact V6 or a compact very close-knit V8 engine. That's really the two engines that now dominate the industry. You have a few outliers, of course. Porsche are never going to be shying away from having a flat 6 on the field. If we go and find here with the Porsche of Alan Alexander, Porsche are never going to give up in their right mind on having the flat 6. I mean, it would completely defeat the purpose of the Porsche. It would be like having a Subaru Impreza without a Boxer 4 engine, or like having a Ford Mustang without a V8. It would just seem almost counterintuitive to even exist past that point. The inline 6, I highly doubt seeing leaving BMW. It's been a little too effective now as the replacement to the V8 we saw back in the M8 and the M6 and all the way back through the Z4. So it's highly unlikely the inline 6 will see its way out. Of course, now in the BMW M3, I believe this is the P58 model. I'll have to double check that one. We do actually have the notes lying around here from our time over on the HCCL Carousel Cup. It was a point worth making back then. Moreover, it has been a case that back onto the point we were making, as you just see here, this is the damage that has now befell the 51 of Michael Purvis. We saw, of course, he did fall down the order some time ago. But back onto that point, if we can go and catch with any of the V10s on the grid at the moment, the age of the V10 did fizzle out with Audi and then Lamborghini. Lamborghini was the one to keep it going the longest after Audi withdrew their factory program. The Huracan saw its last hurrah last season in IMSA, and now it's since been replaced by the Temerario. Now, no one really knows how well that's going to work out for Lamborghini. We have seen pretty decent success out of the Huracan platform. This really does seem to be Lamborghini's bread and butter. They've very rarely been able to compete at the top level, and I think this is come as no surprise to anyone when the SC63 didn't have the greatest of times. It did manage to pick up some solid results here and there in IMSA, but in WEC it was just getting smoked out, and it's not a surprise to see where that comes from. If you've seen any of Lamborghini's previous attempts to compete at the top level of endurance racing, they just, for whatever reason, can't. GT is their bread and butter. They have come to understand that rather implicitly, and the Temerario, I imagine, could be a fantastic upgrade over the Huracan, but again, we've yet to really see anything beyond pen to paper work here on the Temerario. We've seen a handful of testing sessions, but we'll really get to see what it can do in Sebring next year, as I'm pretty sure it is set to avoid Daytona. So this is a very similar thing to what happened with Aston Martin and the Valkyrie program, where they missed out on Daytona to debut the Valkyrie in IMSA and waited until Sebring before they would get their opportunity. Speaking of Aston Martin, a little trouble there for Charlie Harker on his way out of Ravazza. So we see here, Tanguay getting up and around Mals. Donkin still closing in. 7.3 seconds to consider between those two. 34 minutes left to go in this race. LeBay still fourth. Something I want to point out as well is a bleeding gap for Alan Alexander. 4.4 seconds at the moment between himself and Luca Gornheimer, but this is something that's a lot more pressing in one's mind here. Just under 5 seconds away, and looks to potentially be gaining, is the BMW of James Mason. Just one to keep there on the cards in the next 33 minutes of racing. So back on what I was talking about there, it's very similar what we're seeing from the Temerario program to what we saw in the Valkyrie program. It's missing out that first major 24-hour event, as it might just not be the appropriate time. I don't think a lot of manufacturers like the idea of being forced to start at the start of the calendar year for the first ever race, and they really don't want to throw what is a highly experimental platform into a 24-hour race. It's almost like inventing a new way of swimming and then using that to cross the channel. There's a very little chance it's going to work in the long run. Moreover, kind of data one would get by the end of it wouldn't be all that useful when the car's been reduced to a pile of molten carbon fiber and steel. Some manufacturers, though, this has worked for. I mean, look at Ford. They really did throw the Mustang in on the deep end. They were confident in the product they had made, and now you can see with the Mustang, it is a fairly popular car on modern GT grids. It's incredibly popular here on ACC. I think that's mostly because they don't have to deal with the engine reliability issues that has plagued Proton competition in the World Endurance Championship. To be fair, with BMW as well, they did throw it in on the deep end. Admittedly, I think it was the Dubai 24 hours this car made its debut at officially. Not in Daytona. It did, though, race in Daytona, but I think the first ever race was, I believe, the 2022 Dubai 24 hour. So it's still a 24-hour race, just in a different venue in a different part of the world. Nonetheless, though, the BMW, it is a juggernaut to the industry now. BMW, they understood the assignment perfectly when they were making the M4. They knew precisely what needed to change over the M8. They needed a smaller car, one that was more petite, one with a smaller engine, one that was just, by and large, more of a challenger. The M8, a brilliant car in its time, but was just too big, too cumbersome, and not maneuverable enough to keep itself in a constant competition with a grid rising around it. BMW had to make the change. They had to go back to making a smaller GT offering. Maybe not as titular as what we saw out of the Z4. That was really quite micro by comparison. But this was definitely the step in the right direction for BMW, and it's not hard to see where so much of their success has come from. The M4, both on and off the screen, is just a brilliant machine. Again, bit of a polarizing appearance in the modern M4. I think the road car looks a bit terrible, but the front end on this, I don't know what it does, but it really does salvage a lot of it. I think the more aggressive looks belong on a GT car. It's not something that was necessary for the road-going model. It always does look a little bit daft when you see one out in the open space, but the GT, it rocks that look almost impeccably. I would definitely say honest opinions on that one. Something to pick back up on was that gap we previously discussed, Alexander v Mason. Now, that has since dropped to 4.4 seconds, just briefly blips up to 4.5. We had a brief issue there. That's Rafael Bayer, so yellow flags are out ahead of the race leader. He's about to run up on the incident there for the number 28 Lamborghini. You can see, just having made his way back out on track, it's green flags at the moment with 30 minutes of racing left to go. We'll get our final look at the standings and the forecast just before we get down towards the final 30 minutes of racing. See up the road there, that's Ian Skeen in 9th place. Looks to actually be damage on that Mercedes. Let's go and catch on board here with the Garage 93 car. We see Rafael Bayer being forced to cut the Variante Alta. Yes, there is damage on that Mercedes. Could it be suggested that the incident involving the 28 was potentially caused by a collision with the 696? It's a bit bizarre there. But Ian Skeen, still 9th and in that top 10, starting from the back of this grid. Now has to contend with a bit of nose cone damage. Bayer still on his tail. So as we drop under that final 30-minute mark of this race, this is the current scope of things. Luca Goenheimer leads with Exclusive Esports. It has been a long, long climb back to the leading position here with 30 minutes to the checkered flag. Could it be victory for the 77? One definitely rather satisfyingly earned for Goenheimer, crawling back from what looked like a very, very low point out of that first lap. Alan Alexander has put on a brilliant show here. Great defense at the podium, and it's going to be a very solid result, all things considered, if it stays as it is right now. Second place for the 315. James Mason up to third. A real hustle for 5-Star Esports. The early bird of the Sunday League makes his way into Competizione Performance League with a real vengeance. The 413 up to third ahead of the two-time champion here in Competizione Performance League and one-time champion in the Sunday League, Christian LeBay in the 119 Bentley. Now, it's been a mixed bag result for LeBay behind the wheel of the Bentley alongside his compatriots at the Malois Racing Team in the Console Endurance Series, but standing by his lonesome, LeBay has put a very solid result in for Bentley so far, and he's looking at a top 5 to kick off his endeavours in this 3-part series. We see here, this is getting back on board with the 996 Audi, and this is the first time we've ever seen that of Zalan Such in this grid, and he has definitely come into it with quite a serious message to deliver. That 996 has been a proper contender throughout this race. He's definitely found himself into a spot of bother more than a handful of times with other drivers on the grid. Had it not been for those, he'd have been finding himself in that fight for third right about now. Nonetheless, he holds on to a very solid top 5. Looking at it here, Charlie Harker, a very silent procession for the Aston Martin number 33, sporting the livery of the Heart of Racing, but as of right now, taking a look on the roster, I believe Charlie Harker is competing for, and we'll get verification of this in a moment's time. He's with Fortune Racing Esports, so a curious one there. We've seen Charlie Harker compete alongside Stefan Nikolai in the 5-Star Esports car in the Console Endurance Series, but he stands by his lonesome with the Fortune Racing Team. Behind him there, you can see that was the 120 of Vincent Simard. More on that in a moment's time. Ian Skeen is into the pit. Has it been worse for the 696? He's come in, and I believe there has towed to his pit lane box. So is that... Yes, it's a retirement. Skeen is out. Ian Skeen is out of this race. 30 minutes left to go. He's called it quits there. He's thrown the towel in. I'm curious to know what was the deciding point there for Skeen. He was looking at a respectable top 10, having started from the back. He made his way up 50% of the grid. What had to have been the straw to break the camel's back there for Mercedes? Well, we'll hopefully get word out of him in due course. Charlie Harker, again, a silent procession for the Fortune Racing Esports number 33, sporting the colours of the Heart of Racing team. He's 6th place and started towards the back of that top 10. Brooklyn Donkin in 8th place. Great hustle for Euro Titans so far. They're looking at their top scoring drivers being that of Alexander and Donkin as well. That's 2nd and 8th so far. Kevin Quain in 9th and Dan Junior Poulon on a real gamble to Lamborghini has actually seen it come back in his favour, as now, having outlasted the majority of the grid, finds his way into the top 10 in the number 44. Originally slated to drive for Aston Martin on a day like this would have actually been to his benefit, as we see Aston Martin is among the best cars to have in wet and wild conditions. But ultimately, right now finds himself in 10th. Carl Martel in 11th. Vincent Simard finally in for his pit stop. That gives Schimpf 12th place off of him. Michael Purvis looking at a chance of 13th. Then Raphael Bayer could be up to 14th place. Casey Miles is a lap down here, so he's going to have a little bit of a longer drive up to return to an extra position. Turned around, though. Was that by... Yes, I believe it was by that of the... Not the 28, sorry, the 78. Got the front ends mixed up there. 2 identical cars, but Maximilian Schimpf just turned around Casey Miles. What's gone on there? Christophe Dupois, 17th in this race. In terms of nearby considerations for fights, there have been some to have racked our brains for some time. Such versus LeBay, Mason versus Alexander. Right now, not a lot is coming to fruition, and with 25 minutes left to go, the rain's set to pick up by looks of things here. According to the weather forecast, in the next 30 minutes, it is going to get worse here in Imola before it ever stands a chance to get better for some of these drivers. Back on board with the 413 of Mason. LeBay now 17 seconds away from him. That gap that he's focusing on, the one up in front of him, Alan Alexander just got over 5 seconds away from him. He's held up behind Kevin Quain in the 607 Mustang right now, and it's coming in to be a very tense final 25 minutes, not one with many side-by-side battles going on. At least not until the very last second, because again, it's a fight of telemetry here. It's a fight of consistency, and trouble right off the bat there for Mason. Has a little spring of oversteer, has to correct it, takes his way into the runoff down through the Aqua Minerale, just to save himself any kind of spin-out fears. In terms of the fight of Harker v Tanguay, it's still, again, like many battles on this grid, hangs in a very fine balance so far. It is a majority of strategy-focused race so far, with the hopes for conditions to get drier on the run in towards Monza next weekend. To kick off the championship, we had plenty of action in that opening half. As we come into the second half, things have definitely simmered down quite a ways here, almost frozen over in terms of available action, as the drivers now focus their efforts to just surviving the final 30 minutes of racing here in Imola. You see here Kevin Quain now moves over to let James Mason get on through the gap between himself and Alan Alexander, now in the high fives here. I think 5.9 seconds between the 315 and the 413. For the number 77, Luca Goenheimer leads the charge over Alexander by nearly 7 seconds on the exit of the Aqua Minerale. Currently caught up between lap traffic, though. Michael Purvis behind him, Casey Miles up in front. On his way through the Variante Alta. 23 minutes left to go here in Imola. Taking a look at the road ahead. Of course, we'll be heading to Monza after Christmas on December 28th. Then on January 3rd, the season finale in Suzuka. So it can only stand to get better from here. Monza, despite its reputation for causing trouble, often gives us some of the best races of any calendar season. So coming up after Christmas is going to be a bit of a late Christmas present for both us and the drivers, as we'll be heading over to the Temple of Speed. For Suzuka, it's one rarely cited on a majority of calendars, and I think it's unfairly so, because it is proven to be a pretty solid destination, all things considered. considered. It gave us one of the most eventful races of Season 1 of the Console Endurance Series, down to a last lap dash between MSA and Exclusive in some of the most exciting spats of racing we've seen throughout the series. And I think in the very short number of times it's been featured on various different calendars, it's given us good examples of racing. One that is maybe unjustifiably hated by the wider consensus of fans. We'll be looking forward to that one, though, on January 3rd. Just a comment here, that gap. Zuch versus LeBay. Currently at 6.2 seconds, fluctuating to 5.9. So there is still a chance. Oh, big snap there for Zalan Zuch. Very, very good recovery from the 996. We've had quite the myriad of DNFs. And whilst we're talking about the road ahead, there are plenty of drivers who didn't show up to this round that we're excited to hopefully see coming in to round 2 at Monza after Christmas time. So among that includes that of Cas van Velzen. He signed up to race for Nissan in the number 420 GTR. That's why Nissan was included on the BOP listings for today. Looking around this is just all the data we have at the moment. We also have appearances from Kieran Rodd and Tyler Vermack to expect for the Ford Motor Company. They're set to compete with the Mustang. With Lamborghini, we already have our 2 Lambos, actually our 3 Lambos, sorry, for today, that being Schimpf, Poulan, and that of Rafael Bayer as well. For Lexus, we still have yet to see VEC Esports' William Bajor. Now, we've seen him to be the rookie sensation we've all come to know in Season 4 of the NLRL Sunday League. He has made quite the impact in the rookies division, now leading ahead of Sam Angel with Lexus. And we'll see what he can do when let loose into a Lexus for the very first time on TRTN, as we've seen him throughout his time in the Sunday League with Ford in the 7th generation Mustang. The BMW... having a look around here, nothing right now that springs to mind. Of course, we do have a few more drivers from the 5-Star Esports, Daniel Richards among them, set to make arrivals in this series. Looking at AMG, Tobias Sievert of the Exclusive Esports team. Now, we spoke on that earlier on. There are 2 more drivers of Exclusive set to arrive to reinforce that of Luca Goenheimer, so that could be an exciting one to keep an eye on if they do make their full-scale arrival in not season 2, in round 2, I should say. And that would be Vermack and Sievert. We've already seen to be staple talents of the XCL lineup. Looking up the order here for the 315, just to get a look. He is caught up with a little bit of traffic at his tail here. Michael Purvis off by just over a second as he make our way out through Alta, down towards Ravatsa. Now, Mason in a gap here, 4 seconds and closing. This could get rather spicy in the next 19 minutes. In terms of straight line speed, we already know and understand BMW is far and away clear here in Imola. We've already seen it elevated to great extent by both Goenheimer and Mason. So to be sandwiched in between both in a car that really does leave a lot to be desired for straight line speed. Alan Alexander knows he'll have to attack for the corners. He'll have to play for combat here. He can't afford to wait around for the straights to arrive. He is not in that same predicament faced by BMW, faced by Ford, faced by Lexus for that matter, as all 3 of them are the straight line kings of the GT3 meta. We'll be keeping an eye on that gap. 3.7 seconds at the last observed interval there. On board with the race leader now, Luca Goenheimer up by 6.5 seconds here over Alan Alexander. Now, I must say, out past the 4-second gap, this has been a lot slower to progress for the number 77. He was able to make up 4 seconds worth of time between himself and Alexander rather quickly, but anything past that has slowed to a crawl. I think we found the upper end for performance out of both the Porsche and the BMW in comparison to one another. It's just enough of push and pull either way to keep them in this uneven stalemate heading into the last 18 minutes of racing. Out through Aqua Minerale, 77 about to run up on more traffic there. Maximilian Schimpf in the number 78 Lamborghini coming up next. James Mason, he stands upon the chances here if he can knuckle down the next quarter hour of racing, as he can literally see, and so too can we, the physical gap between himself and second place. He stands within the chances to see himself to the front row, and it would be quite a valiant end for round 1. for the 413 if he's capable of doing so. We've seen him to have quite a solid performance across the board, no matter the league here. So Mason looking at chances to make a real grand impression in yet another one, the Triple Crown Enduro. Now that the gap has been cleared between himself and Michael Purvis, his teammate moving over for him, of course, both of them for 5-star esports. So easier to navigate traffic for him that time around. In towards turn 19, down towards lap 56 at the start-finish line there. In towards turn 1 almost immediately. Trouble for the 78 car, and that's Maximilian Schimp. So the one that was about to be overtaken by the 77 of Luca Goenheimer, since found his own wad of troubles out through by looks of it there. That's down at the Variante Villeneuve. Also having to cut across was that of Michael Purvis. A lot of drivers being forced now to cut the Variantes. I don't think by volition. I don't think this is something they're willingly making the decision on themselves. It is now where the conditions, as we can no doubt see, and you know we all have eyes here, is the conditions are getting far, far worse. And with no signs of it drying up even a tad in the next 16 minutes, it is looking rather bleak for available grip for quite a few cars who have maybe doubled down and dared to go the extra mile on strategy, skipping out on those tyres in exchange for a shorter pit stop time for just more fuel. Right now, that gap for second, 4 seconds. About to hover into a potential high 3-second margin between the 413 and the 315. Set to make a very exciting run into the final quarter hour of racing, on what has been an hour and 45 minutes coming up on a very interesting racing to kick off this miniature series here. One of 3 over the course of the winter period. Also, what is set to bring us onto the advent of the first ever race of 2026 for us here on TRTN will be the season finale of this micro series, the Triple Crown Enduro. .4 seconds the current margin. We'll catch on with those two in a moment's time. Taking a look around the field to another progressing gap here. Zelan Such versus Christian Lebay. And on the last lap, we're about to see those times come in. 148.710, 148.615. So very small but noticeable gains there for the 996. He has more pace in the last lap by about 1/10 of a second. Now, at that rate of progress, it's going to be very slow for him to make up significant wads of time over the Bentley. Moreover, once he does get up to the Bentley, it's going to be very hard for either of these two to gain or lose ground, considering these are two of the widest cars on the grid. The Audi has been a mainstay for good defensive performances in every time it's been deployed, really, throughout any kind of coverage of an event here on TRTN. We've seen Audi to be a very good customer when it comes to those defending drives. It's got a very wide back end there. Those flared arches give the car a wide and overarching presence, makes it very hard to get wind of it either side. So on tracks like, for example, Zolder and Bathurst, it makes for one of the best defensive packages just to have the wider car. It doesn't matter if the car is necessarily faster or not, when size quite literally does matter in the defending argument. Of course, two of the widest cars, there's not going to be an awful lot of room for a good 80% of the track here. You would be looking in towards those more dangerous overtaking spots to where either of these two would have a chance to gain or lose position out. And really, I could see this ending in tears if they really do keep progressing down this path. Now nearly to within the 4-second margin there, Such to Lebay for the fight of 4th place. One to definitely consider here. Actually, hang on one moment. We will have to catch on with that. There is trouble, and it is for James Mason. Drops down away, still holds on to, by looks of it, their 3rd place, but ran into serious troubles in that last run out through Ravazza. Was that self-inflicted, or could that come from his efforts to try and get around lapped traffic? I believe he was out in front of at least Purvis at the time. Doesn't look like any damage on the 413. We're on with Kevin Quain just to get a look over his rear to see what's the scope of things for that 413. Oh, we'll have to catch up a little later on. We were about to get on board with this fight here. Tanguay versus Harker. This is going to be an interesting one. 6th place up for grabs. Aston Martin versus Bentley. The Battle of Britain taking place right here in Emilia-Romagna, Italy. 12.5 minutes left to go. This could be an exciting one. Bentley's 4-litre twin-turbo V8 engine versus Aston Martin's 4-litre twin-turbo V8 engine. Bentley's one was co-engineered by M Sport UK. This one, under the bonnet of the Aston Martin, was co-engineered by AMG. It's almost a pity then when one thinks about the Bentley, because if you've heard the Bentley Continental, that 2018 model, in real life, it has a very noticeable sound to it, and this monstrously loud turbo spool, but it's just not present in this game. It's rather sad, really, because it is one of the best sounding GTs by a long shot. Sadly, you can't hear that turbo at all. In fact, you'd not be mistaken for thinking there wasn't a turbo at all in those Bentleys by the way that they sound. On board with Charlie Harker, 1.4 seconds between himself and David Tangway. That potential charge for 6th place coming up. 11.5 minutes left to go. Just to get a quick update on any fights going on between Mason and Alexander. That has quickly dissipated after the incident just last lap gone for James Mason out through Ravazza. Now it's definitely all hands on deck in the discussion of these two new fights down in the end of the 2nd row into the 3rd, and then on the end of the 3rd row into the 4th. So 4th, 5th, 6th and 7th all up for grabs at the moment. That's currently between Christian Lebay, Zalan Such, Charlie Harker and Brooklyn Donkin. No, sorry, David Tangway and Charlie Harker. Brooklyn Donkin's down in 8th place and is more than comfortable in his position on track, nearly a quarter of the way up away from that of Kevin Quain. It always comes to struggle when reading down through the order there. It's just, after a certain amount of time, my eyes, it's just not working anymore, folks. I mean, they didn't work before today. Blind, practically. Word from James Mason. Damage on rear. So the 413 did find its way into trouble on the exit of Ravazza, and it has cost him, as he now finds himself nursing rear aerodynamics damage. So that is going to have a slight knock-on effect for him. Not as dramatically seen as what we would potentially see of a front aero cave-in, which we've seen plenty of times, even including today for some drivers. More so could be the case with the 413 sees this damage as not significant enough to warrant a move to the pit lane. He's got 10 minutes to the line here, and with nearly 2 minutes per lap, we're looking at functionally, say, about 6 or 7 more laps before the end of round 1. So not the end of the world, definitely a manageable chance here to stay in control of a 3rd place finish today. There's very little threat from behind at this time. Looking for the 413 on the map. The gap between himself and Christian Lebay is still healthy enough to where he doesn't have to worry too greatly about anyone having a pop at his current position on track. The 28 of Rafael Bayer, though, is in trouble down at the Variante Villeneuve once again. And this could definitely be the requiem now for Lamborghini. It's been a huge wake-up call for the Huracan, as it has been aloof with stability concerns here. And oh, it's not exactly peachy clean for Aston Martin. Big step out there, but great recovery by Charlie Harker. Get a look on this on the replays here. Down through the run of the Aqua Minerale. We also have more information off of James Mason. He was hit. And we also just see on the live view to the bottom right-hand side was Charlie Harker being forced to cut over the Variante Alta. So we've got more news on that developing story for what happened to James Mason, where we originally thought he maybe ran into bother out of the Ravazza section of the track here, of which we also see continued struggles for the 33, having a spot of lawn mowing there for the Aston Martin of Charlie Harker. And he was tagged by another car. So it could very well have been in the case to try and lap himself around. I think it was the Lamborghini he was catching up on. That was Schimpf, if memory serves correctly. He had already gotten out past that of the 51. Right now, he does find himself once again up the road from Michael Purvis in the 51 McLaren. Mason still maintains 3rd place. He's 5.5 seconds away from Christian Lebay, and the way things stand at the moment, even with that rear aero damage, it doesn't look too severe to cost him the chances of 3rd place. Bear in mind, Lebay has got his own problems to be attending to. We see Rafael Bayer still nursing significant front-end damage. You can see Alan Alexander getting around him there and towards turn 1 on the start of lap 58 for Bayer. That'll be, I think, lap 59, or actually even further north than that for that of Alan Alexander, if we try and catch on board. We just briefly see here Casey Mouse trying to unlap himself from Brooklyn Donkin, so that's the only thing constituting a fight at this leg of the race for Donkin so far. We see Gornheimer in the background, about to unlap. Just actually lap 61 My goodness there for the Porsche. You see the 119 looking to get around his teammate there. Kevin Quain moves over to allow Christian Lebay easier leeway up towards the next lapped car. That's the 13th place, number 51, 5-star esports McLaren. We do have a temporary white flag. It was for the 78. Maximilian Schimpf there, I think, giving way to James Mason. But it has now created an even larger buffer zone for Christian Lebay to try and have a go at a potential podium charge by the end of round 1. You see here with the 119. Definitely an exciting start to the season, though, even if the second half has been a little bit more tame than what we had in the very chaotic opening half throughout round 1. This is a pretty common symptom of the wet races. You do get these very entertaining opening halves, these very explosive bouts of racing, and it does tend to close back up towards the end, as we do see that all hope is not yet lost for fights. If we go back to that discussion not long ago, as a matter of fact, looking back, it was, I believe, Tanguay and Harker. And now, since that incident for Harker, he finds himself 7.6 seconds out from David Tanguay. So very little consideration at this time for future fights between those two at least. So as we look here with James Mason, there's the buffer zone for him at the moment. The only car left to stand in the way, as Mason himself has a bit of trouble sliding out through Ravazza. Could that be the symptoms of that rear aero damage? Now, we did say that it might not be too severe, but there is that obvious consideration. If the rear aero is compromised, it means that the front now has disproportionately more aerodynamic grip than the rear. It does create a tail-happy car, and in conditions like this, it is only exacerbated even further into a potential spin-out risk. So Mason's going to be sort of treading on eggshells for the next 5.5 minutes. That could still leave him vulnerable, and as you can see, it is actually coming to be much, much worse now for the 413 than it has been in the last couple of laps. Could it be a slight loss of composure for Mason amidst the pressure now that Lebay is only a single car away from him? 3 seconds and closing for the 119. But Mason, even if he is to drop down towards 4th place at the end of this race, it's still a great takeaway from what has been an admirable fight up towards the position he currently covets. But of course, he is dead set on a 3rd place finish. He wants a podium to start the season off with. It's going to give him the best running chance to challenge Alexander and Goenheimer into the next 2 rounds, where he knows the BMW will be more confident. But that one bout of contact has spelt doom for a potential chance of that. As you can see, looming round the corner on his way down towards Aqua Minerale is the Bentley of Christian Lebay. 2.6 seconds and closing in at a rate of knots there. Maximilian Schimpf in the way at the moment of Lebay, yet to move over. Not that he has to at this time. He's got to be a little bit closer to Lebay before he considers the option to move out. Better exit of the 2 there. Mason trying to toe the line with 4 minutes 20 seconds left to go. Functionally looking at perhaps 1, 2, perhaps 3 more laps. Now that's still depending on what the 77's going rates are. So that'd be about 3 more laps-ish for all drivers on this grid. Things have just become a great deal more tense for that of James Mason. Let's get a look on board with the attacking car of 2s. We just briefly touch in here with that of Zalan Such. Finds himself currently 2.5 seconds, so I wouldn't rule this one out entirely, as all he has to do is navigate the 78 car, and by the looks of it there, that's done for him. So off in the background was Maximilian Schimpf with Lamborghini. Again, stability has been the major concern for all of the Volkswagen Group cars coming into this race, and that stands across the board, so that includes Porsche as well. In the hands of Alan Alexander, though, that Porsche has been exceptionally fast in today's race. 3 minutes left to go. We're coming up onto the final chapters of round 1. And we are potentially in the midst of a 3-way clash for the podium. Mason, Lebay, and Such coming up into the next 3 minutes as what looks to be, and now I don't want to get ahead of myself here because I think it might just be a rendering error. Yes, there is still plenty of rain, but it does look noticeably brighter out in terms of cloud coverage. I can almost stand to see little patches of blue there up in the sky. Now, it is still quite heavy here. The drivers might not be seeing even any respite at all coming into the last couple of laps of round 1 of the Triple Crown Enduro. We see here, this is Michael Purvis, considerable front end damage now for the 51. His teammate, James Mason, now having the world's weight stacked on his shoulders. He manages to make light work there, lapping past Christophe Dupois. Meanwhile, the 78 runs into even more trouble. That was, I believe, Maximilian Schimpf. Even more issues there with Lamborghini. 1.8 seconds at the previous interval as they cross the line. The Bentley now clear line of sight on the BMW. The Audi not too far off a shout of the Bentley. This could get quite exciting here. 6 cylinders versus 8 cylinders versus 10 cylinders. This could get to be quite an interesting fight for the final run of things in round 1. We can see, though, that buffer zone created by Christophe Dupois is doing Labé many favours to isolate himself away from a potential counter fight from that of Zalan Such in the 996 Audi. It's given him a bit of breathing space here so that he can start to focus on the BMW up in front. You can see those three right now. 3rd, 4th and 5th. BMW, Bentley and Audi. We'll stay on board with James Mason in what is set to be a royal defence of 3rd place for BMW. And for that matter, 5-Star Esports as well. They're acing the hole at the moment, that 413. This is riding on the line for them, whether or not they get outscored by Maloir Racing in the starting round. They are looking for good results here. It has been a constant climb uphill for the 5-Star team, rebuilding from what was almost the ground up in their rebrand when they were the former K1 Esports team. They underwent a massive reform inside of the team, one that is still currently underway from our understanding and will continue to be underway into 2026. So a lot of big waves of changes here. One of the remaining constants has been that of drivers like Mason. So as we head on to what is coming up to be the final lap, it'll be one last dash here between these three to decide the last of those podium positions, as we already got wind from the leading 77. He's onto that final lap, so not long from now we'll be getting on board with Luca Goenheimer, who has set a real standard here for the exclusive esports team here in their first ever competitive entry to Competizione Performance League. Of course, when they moved the calendar dates for these races onto the more adaptable side of things for the European audiences, they invited with a whole swarm of drivers in who had previously never competed in the Competizione Performance League, a league that has been primarily marketed towards the North American crowd, operating on the Eastern Standard Time Zone. We've seen a lot of drivers from the United States. We've seen a lot of drivers from Canada. We've even seen a handful of drivers from South America as well, Brazil, and I believe Argentina as well at one point. And also a handful of drivers from Oceania. No, Clinton Bourne, Graham Green, 2 drivers to think of there. They've been with us for the last couple of seasons. Bourne especially has seen both seasons all the way through. Right now, we are looking at a fight, though, between Mason and Labé. Bear in mind, we've had a handful of British drivers as well. That's one consideration. We did have Hayden Prodger in GT4s. We also had some other European drivers as well. Looking back to think about it, we've got... Oh, hang on a tick here. Big steps out of oversteer. We also had Giovanni Battiali as well, who's also set to make a return in this championship. We'll have to catch on board, though, with this fight for 3rd in due course, as making his way down towards the line here on what has been an exceptional start, a running start, one could say, here for Luca Goenheimer. He had to fight all the way back up to the lead of this race, and by a long shot, he takes the checkered flag, wins the first round of 3 here in the Competizione Performance League Triple Crown Enduro. Alan Alexander heading to the line in for an admirable 2nd place. He managed to finally make justice upon the 315 Porsche for Euro Titans. The 413, though, still being chased all the way down to the checkered flag. Look at the gap currently residing between James Mason and Christian Labé. It's going to be a drag race by looks of it between Bentley, Audi and BMW, but by a hair's width. Heading to the line then, James Mason for 5-Star Esports clinches it to a podium in the 413. Labé off by 3/10 of a second, and then 7/10 off of him is Zalan Such in the 996. An admirable fight back there for the Audi. He's seen great hardship in today's race, but was happy there for a top 5 result. David Tanguay looking upon the chances of 6th place ahead of Charlie Harker in 7th. We've got confirmed finishes there for Brooklyn Donkin 8th place and Kevin Quain for 9th. Vincent Simard in 12th, with Maximilian Schimpf in 13th place, Bayer 15th, Mal 16th, Dupois 17th. We're about to see, though, down towards the line here, in the exit of Ravazza. Here comes David Tanguay. Admirable effort here, and it's going to be great points on the table for the Maloir Racing team. Good point spread there, 4th and 6th. That's going to be much closer spread than what we've seen for quite a few teams so far today. Great hustle for Tanguay. That could actually put Malwar Racing in a potential joint lead with some of the heavy hitters on the podium there. Charlie Harker to the line with Fortune Racing, number 33, takes 7th. There's your final results. Luca Goenheimer wins in round 1 of 3 here. Admirable effort there by the 77 of Exclusive Esports. Proper form, a very high bar set by the BMW. Alan Alexander in a great fight for 2nd place there. James Mason, though, talk of the town, held off and advanced by both the likes of Zalan Such and Christian Lebay for 3rd place. Fought against both Bentley and Audi at the last hurdle and succeeded for 3rd. Lebay in 4th. Such 5th, Tanguay 6th, Harker 7th, Donkin 8th, Quain 9th, Poulan 10th, Martel 11th, Simard 12th, Shimp 13th, Purvis 14th, Bayer 15th, Mal 16th, and Dupois in 17th. A whole myriad of DNFs, some we still yet to have a proper explanation for. One of them among them was Ian Skeen, Garage 93 Racing in 18th place, Lucas Kostra, Sergio Hernandez, Til Schwerin, Gino Latorre, Julio Bahena, Richard Cecil, and Axel Cassier, all DNFs in round 1 here in a wet and wild run of things in Imola. What a race it has been, though, to kick off this 3-part mini-series. And if you're curious to see where we're going to be after today, well, we'll let you enjoy your Christmas, and we'll be catching you this coming Sunday from now, December 28th, at the Autodromo Nazionale de Monza, the Temple of Speed, for the 2nd of 3 races in the Triple Crown Enduro. And then we'll be seeing you into 2026 on January 3rd, at the Suzuka International Racing Course. What a great race today, though. Well done to our podium sitters, Goenheimer, Alexander, and Mason. Very, very well done. What a performance we've seen, and it's definitely set the bar very, very high, running in towards round 2. That's all from us here on TRTN. Have a wonderful Christmas, and take care. Good night.